Like, those are Nazis. What the fuck?
Oh.
I'm a Nazi? Is that what you're saying?
Uh-huh.
What is happening, bro? I mean, they all just hate Jews. No, but like, they don't.
They all just hate Jews. Here's the problem, is that until I see Hassan calling out his own community and all these people with the Palestine flags that are like trying to shit on a person for trying to express like sorrow or discomfort or something like that for the people that got killed, then I'm not going to take this seriously. I mean, I'm just not, like, until you can hold your own side accountable, then you holding the other side accountable doesn't really mean a whole lot. That's the problem.
Just hate Jews, brother. They hate
Jesus, dude.
It's black people too.
Bro,
like, what did not?
Okay, I don't hate black people. Like, look, this idiot. Okay, first off, I'm black. You Turk. This guy's black, and like, is anyone hating on him right here? Third, the
racism community is very open and inclusive. The only requirement is for you to be racist. You can be a black racist, you can be a white racist, you can be a brown racist, but you have to be racist.
People who say that we hate
Jews
how
it is.
Also say that you hate Jews, you fucking idiot.
Exactly.
He's like trying to be the token anti-Semite. Hey, buddy, the ADL's on your ass too.
Mm-hmm.
All day long, this guy talks about like, the hostages and talks about his whole thing is being the Palestinian guy, right? Being the Palestinian activist. Who do you think is bombing Palestinians?
Yep.
And then you're going to use the tactic, oh, we hate all Jews.
Mm-hmm.
Really? You're going to employ the same media tactics that they're...
Well, here, it's very simple, right? All you have to do is look at, like, any of the attacks and shootings on any of these, like whether it was those Israeli ambassadors, whether it was the beach shooting yesterday, or whether it was something that happened in the past I'm just not thinking of right this second. And you'll see that some of the most loud and vitriolic voices that are delegitimizing, making light of, and joking about, or even celebrating the murder of these Jews are people that some of them have the Palestinian flag. Yeah, there's other white nationalist Nazi people in there too, but the problem is that, like, I have no problem condemning any of these, like, white nationalist, Republican, conservative people and saying they're disgusting and it's horrible to say that and there's no reason to say it at all, and I say that regularly. But the problem is that somebody like Hassan very rarely ever calls out the actual people that are, like, on his side for bad behavior or for going over the line. That's the main issue.
Using against you. Also, how do you talk about what is the actual way? How do these libtards justify talking about Israel and Palestine all day, every day, without also talking about Judaism? Mm-hmm. They very cleverly, and at this point, it's been over 2 years since October 7th. They know what they're doing. They'll say words like, they'll say Israeli instead of Jew. They'll say Zionist instead of Jew.
He's right. He's right. Absolutely. Like, they said that Expedition 33 seemed like a very Israeli game.
And they'll be like, look, I'm not like those Nazis over there. They know what they're doing. They just want the cancel culture to go on us. Mm-hmm. The thing is, Hassan, you can't talk about Israel and Palestine without also talking about Judaism. Israel does not exist without Judaism. I know you like to say it's all about imperialism and it's all about the apartheid state. Why does it exist? Does Israel want to establish a third temple? Do they want to destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque? What's going on? Why is Netanyahu talking about destroying Rome again?
Nope.
Saying the biggest threat to Jews was Rome. Does he say Israel or does Netanyahu say Jews? You're being very selective, and it's this strategic way so that not only you don't get banned, but also so you could throw people who are actually on the front line spreading the message that you pretend like you're spreading. You just throw them under the bus. Us, me.
Yeah, and he never actually calls out the people that are celebrating murders and shit like that either. That's what's crazy about him. And I don't know what to say, but that's it. And God has asked, yeah, he's right. There's a clip of Netanyahu saying that. I'm assuming Stinko's talking about the book that he was reading, and then somebody asked him a comment for it. That's kind of what I'm betting that he's going off of. So yeah, is Rome the USA in his analogy? No, it's complicated, right? It's very complicated. So yeah. Anyway, here is the easiest way to tell if somebody is a grifter, okay? This is the easiest way to tell if somebody is actually in it for the love of the game versus somebody who is just making it up and just trying to maintain relevance. How often do they go against their own side? If they never go against their own side, they're grifting. They are. They're grifting. They're making shit up. They are just saying what people want to hear, and that's it. That is the one test that you can use. And if people don't do that, that's it. They're audience captured. They are. A lot of people are afraid of losing their audience, and that's the reason why they do it. They're terrified of losing their audience and losing the power that they have. So instead of that, they decide to give it up willingly by not even saying what they believe. I think it's sad. I really do. But you know, at the end of the day, I think it's actually quite common. I don't have a side, so I feel so differently in every issue. Has no correlation to a side as well. Yeah, I mean, I guess so, right? So as long as I hate the left, I hate the woke, is not a grifter. I think that to an extent he does feel that way. I think that's probably true. And I think most people feel that way, if you want me to be honest. I think that there's a lot of leftist liberals that actually hate the woke stuff, but they're afraid of saying it because they don't want to get labeled by all of these like weird groups online as like a racist or a Nazi or something like that. It's like a form of like passive suppression, and I think that's what happens. Okay, gentlemen, it's your boy. Alrighty, guys. Thank you for adventuring, experimenting, breaking things, and helping us shape Vera into the world that it can all become. Your support means the world to us. It's our sole endeavor to make fellow lovers of MMORPG genre proud. Thank you. So this is where I spawn in at. There's a lot of fucking people here. Holy shit. God damn. Okay, and then these are some of the players. All right, let's go ahead and talk to... What the fuck? This guy's like... he's just a fucking orc. Change DLSS performance? I don't think it really matters, but I mean, I might as well. If you guys want me to, it shouldn't make a big difference. And then quality. Okay. Oh, wow. That really made a big difference, actually. Okay, so let's talk to this guy. Okay, Gatewatcher, Al-Shari. Is there fucking... How do I... Oh, F. Got it. Okay, by Light of the Phoenix, you stand once more upon Vera. Value and wisdom or renewal. Okay, seek order and conquest. Okay, I want wisdom and renewal or order and conquest. Okay, we obviously want order and conquest. Wisdom and renewal. This sounds like some Dragonflight bullshit. Yeah, absolutely not. Order and conquest for sure. And then your path lies not with the sun.
Can you cover the Nicki Minaj, Gavin Newsom beef? There's a Nicki Minaj, Gavin Newsom beef. Are the Barbs really in it still? Because I feel like at the peak of the peak of the Barbs, I mean that was like a decade ago at this point. They were a force to be reckoned with. But it's gotta be difficult if you're like, because Barbs are mostly gay, right? Barbs are supposed to be like, as far as I understand, like there are a lot of Barbs who are gay, they're black, they're brown, and Nicki Minaj is like MAGA pivot. I just don't know how many of the Barbs are going to also, like, I mean, I guess if they were sticking by her with all of the affiliations that she had up until this point, they'll probably stick through the MAGA stuff too, but I don't know. Once you lose your Brazilian fans, it's over. I'm writing for Nicki, I'm sorry. That's honestly insane, but congratulations, I think. I mean, it's basically the equivalent of just admitting that you're in a cult or something. Like at that point, congratulations. I don't know. That's how Stan Twitter works, man. They don't turn. They do though. They do. Stan Twitter does turn sometimes. I think when it gets to a certain point, I think Nicki Minaj might have passed that point, but maybe not. Like her pivot into MAGA, she very quickly became like a hardliner. I just want to say I was there early. I was there early when I criticized Nicki Minaj during COVID and even ratioed her, and then the Barbs never let me live that down. You know, I'm still here. My opinions haven't changed. I'll still ride for you, Barbs. Like, not on the basis of being a Barb, but I'll still ride for your, you know, rights and stuff, your liberties, which you might not care as much about, I guess, but I'm still here. I originally ratioed Nicki Minaj in like 2020 or 2021, I can't recall, when she was talking about her cousin's balls or something. And then a tweet that I was supposed to reply to Nicki Minaj with, that I didn't even end up replying to Nicki Minaj with, that I left in the drafts about Tucker Carlson, was made into this major issue. Austin Ox made a whole video about it. It was pretty good. Don't let the Barbs see the cane, Unc. It's all good. Listen, for all of the controversies throughout the many, many years that I have fought for things that I believe in, you know, I've just, yeah, here it is. I said, they want you to get vaccinated for the Met. If I get vaccinated, it won't be for the Met. It'll be once I feel I've done enough research. I'm working on that now. In the meantime, my lows, be safe. Wear the mask with 2 strings that grips your head and face, not that loose one. I said the world awaits your wonderful contribution to the scientific community. That really activated the bars. That really pissed them off. I mean, I don't know. I don't really care if you like still listen to Nicki Minaj. I don't have any issue with that. I don't give a fuck about that at all, for the record. I'm not like, oh my God, boycott Nicki Minaj. I don't really give a shit. That's not what I'm saying at all. Don't misunderstand me. I feel like being a stan is a little bit different though. Cause like being a stan is being ride or die, and defending shit that's like, being a stan is defending the politics, the individual politics of the person, not just like consuming their music or their art or something. Like that's definitely a little crazy in my opinion. Or like even defending their like personal choices and things of that nature, like the way, like what they're doing. As a Barb, I believe that she's playing a long game for something that we don't know about yet. There's a lot of stuff happening behind the scenes regarding Jay-Z and Desiree, the CEO of Rock Nation. That's why this whole thing started. They owe her more than $4 million. Nicki's very smart and crazy. She knows what's going on and who Trump is and what he stands for. It's not about Trump or her supporting MAGA. No, I think it is. I mean, you're not wrong about like leaning into the Trump direction as like as a grift or whatever. Like, I don't think that aspect of it is incorrect. I think that analysis is true. She is like performatively leaning into Trump, but I don't think it's for some higher priority, some like grand design beyond like she just probably wants the Trump administration to defend her loved ones eventually. She sees which way the winds are blowing in a way that is not dissimilar to how like big corporations make this right-wing pivot. She's doing the same thing, I think. You know, a lot of people pivot to the right when they get into trouble. That's all this is. Yeah, people find God, you know. The unique predicament for someone like Nicki Minaj, however, is that her fandom is mostly comprised of, you know, queer people who are black and brown. And that's why it's like shocking to see people still tried to deal with this very clear MAGA pivot, like pro MAGA pivot. Like with T Swift, I get it. You know what I mean? Because like T Swift, universal fandom, but like a lot of white women, right? And we know white women voting patterns, right? That if T Swift made a right wing pivot in terms of like her fandom, I think I could totally see a lot of people also going with that pivot, because at the very least they can just like be quote unquote oblivious to the impact of reactionary politics, right? And that's why white women still majority vote for Donald Trump. Not to say like all white women who follow Taylor Swift have this kind of politics, because obviously 48% of white women don't vote for Donald Trump, right? And vote against Donald Trump. But do you see what I mean? As far as like numbers that are like numbers that would be at least privileged enough not to care about this kind of pivot, or this kind of politics, would be more so on the like for the T Swift pivot. I could totally see that audience as opposed to like Nicki Minaj's audience, because a lot of us grew up with her and she was an icon for a lot of queer black people. I moved on from Nicki, but it did take a lot of time for me to go. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like it's. I get the cultural impact that Nicki Minaj had for such a long period of time. I just don't understand how there's still people out there that are riding, maybe not to the same degree, but like riding for her politics, her new politics. That's crazy. This person says, oh, once you lose the Brazilian fans, it's over. I know you know about Swifties for Kamala Law. Also, you are not a fandom person. I get it, because I'm not either. Yeah, I've never been a big fandom person. What does she do? Oh no, she's just been Nicki Minaj has been like actively doing like pro MAGA stuff, and I guess now she's going after Gavin Newsom, which, you know, I'm not like the biggest fan of Gavin Newsom either, but I certainly think Gavin Newsom's politics are at least like I would say Gavin Newsom's politics are closer to mine than Nicki Minaj's. At least the way Nicki Minaj is presenting herself nowadays, you know? Like I have my disagreements and my significant disagreements with someone like Gavin Newsom, But, you know, while they're both far away from the way I see the world, both Nicki Minaj and Gavin Newsom, at least Gavin Newsom is like marginally closer. I don't know. They were fighting because she was talking negatively about trans kids. Yeah. But that's just stan culture and politics actually mix so weirdly because like a lot of stans, at least in my experience, from what I remember, a lot of stans basically fucking have like their demonstration of politics is very woke, like hyper woke, rad lib, right? Having said that, however, they just kind of use it as a talking point rather than like having any sort of firm commitment to a political ideology. So it always leads to this interesting phenomena where there'll be like, I saw some people basically saying like, well, Gavin Newsom's a Zionist. Like there were barbs that were like calling out Gavin Newsom's like pro-Israel stance, which thank you for doing that. I agree. Right. But also at the same time, they're like defending Nicki Minaj, defending Donald Trump. So it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It's like it's very compartmentalized, if that makes sense. That's right. The LAPD's like press conference last night. TMZ was first to report that there were 2 found in Rob Reiner's home, but the ages matched Rob Reiner's age and Rob Reiner's wife, Michelle Singer Reiner's age. We covered that when TMZ broke that story. And then a couple hours later, People magazine actually broke the story that the son was the suspect. Anyway, I'm moving on from the Nicki Minaj stuff because we're going to be talking about Rob Reiner. For a lot of you that don't know Rob Reiner, he's very interesting. I mean, he was a very interesting guy. Very, very much a big Democratic Party booster. The reason why I'm talking about his politics is because although he was allegedly, I mean, he was found Johnson with many in the vicinity of Brown University anyway, but I guess it's America. So it is what it is. Like, I don't even understand. I don't even understand what the fuck is happening. All right. Speaking of insanity, we are going to talk once again about Brown University. Okay? Brown University is in the news because there was a shooting that took place, a school that took place at Brown University a couple days ago. Yes, botted. That's why the number of chatters and the number that is up here on the screen is damn near identical. 29,000 chatters, 32,000 live viewers. I know your favorite content creator has to deal with botting allegations, but even your favorite content creator who despises me, no matter who it is, has actually openly admitted that I'm one of the only top content creators that has had an infallible track record when it comes to not botting. Hey, dude, do you ever feel like retiring to a non-hate channel? I don't know what that means. Do you mean like hating Donald Trump, the president of the United States of America? Is that what you're reducing my commentary to? Honestly, I'm always surprised by the amount of people that walk up to you during IRLs. Why? In the normal world, a lot of people, in the real world, people that go outside, people that have jobs, people that have friends, people that socialize with one another are not as invested in the narratives led by mostly extremely online weirdos invested in slop. It's a totally separate reality. All right.
Overnight, a stunning turn of events. The suspect still at large as authorities in Rhode Island admit they are releasing the person of interest in the horrific mass shooting at Brown University, which left 2 dead and 9 injured.
Sometimes you head in one direction and then you have to regroup and go in another, and that's exactly what has happened over the last 24 hours or so.
Sunday morning, the FBI and local law enforcement announced they had detained a person of interest at this Hampton Inn about 20 miles away from campus.
I see all the cop cars and FBI marshals down in the lobby, and I'm like, this isn't right.
But now authorities say after examining the evidence further, the investigation has shifted directions.
I think it's fair to say that there is no basis to consider him a person of interest. So that's why he's being released.
Still, authorities say this video does show a person they are looking for and are asking the public to scour their own photos and videos from the scene.
There just weren't a lot of cameras in that brown building. We're not holding back video that we think would be useful.
The chaos unfolding during final exams just after 4 p.m. Saturday, when alerts of an active...
I genuinely don't understand how they let this guy get away. Like, they found a different person of interest and then they released them. And I cannot comprehend how this took place, especially in this day and age. I do not understand how they can be this incompetent. It's also wild that they just straight up release the name of a person of interest instantly, leading to at least one day of news cycle being led by, I guess, someone totally random and irrelevant. What the is happening? It blows my mind that even though we have this massive surveillance state, this is supposed to be the one thing that doesn't take place. You know, Palantir, AI surveillance, constant cameras everywhere, constantly being surveilled by the state. And you just let this shit slide? Like, what are we doing?
The shooter on the Ivy League campus first went out.
2 victims, 1 shot in the back, 1 shot in the shoulder.
Students barricading themselves inside classrooms, hiding underneath desks, crouched in fear.
It was a good thing you didn't do a deep dive on that random dude. Yeah, I didn't because dude, the reason why I didn't do a deep dive on the random dude when the name was released is because I now have to change what I consider to be like a firm, verifiable truth coming from official organs of the state. Back in the day, if the police or the authorities released the name, usually they would say this is a person of interest, but we've elevated it to a suspect. There's an investigation going on or something like that. Nowadays, even with like the way that the FBI works, it's so incompetent that just like with the West Virginia governor revealing that both of the National Guards members were slain in this took place near the White House, I was like, let's just hold off on that real quick. It's more important now than ever before to not actually cover breaking news without some serious scrutiny. Okay.
Heart-pounding video showing the moments police officers entered a room where a number of students were sheltering in place.
Providence Police!
Hands up, hands! Oh, excuse me, there's something going on. We're here to help you. Just listen to what we have to say, okay? All right, breathe. Anybody hurt?
Police say the gunman fired more than 40 rounds from a 9mm handgun inside a classroom.
I heard the gun right around the corner, and then looking out the window, I could just I saw the victims' bodies, and it was really frightening.
Joseph Aduro, who is graduating this month, was leading a study.
Bro, it is insane that in this day and age in the United States of America, you can be double victimized. You can be a survivor of a school. There was a survivor from Parkland that was shot in Parkland that went to Brown University and had to sit through another school. That is crazy. There were 2 students, actually. But there was one that was literally shot. Like, what are we doing, man?
Study group of about 60 students inside a lecture hall when the shooter walked in.
Right after he mumbled whatever he said, that he just started right away. There was no hesitation.
Yeah, same thing happened in Michigan State too. There was a person who survived another school only to be
made eye contact with him. What did your mind tell you in terms of what was happening in that moment?
Immediately when I saw him, I saw a gun. The gun was so big and long that I genuinely thought okay, this is the end of the road for me. So I texted my entire family. I said, I love you all. I love you all. There's an active shooter. Please pray. And then I texted my parents, oh my goodness, he's in the room. God, I'm so scared.
Oduro says he held on to one student who was shot twice in her leg, comforting her.
I gave her my hand to squeeze it as hard as she could. I said, put all your pain on me because I could take it.
She was squeezing your hand.
Yeah.
And Oduro tells me he actually helped carry that student to a police car so she could be rushed to a hospital. Brown University has canceled all remaining classes and finals for the semester, and now the manhunt for a suspect is back on.
And the breaking news this morning, just a stunning development here on the campus at Brown University in Providence, Rhode Island. Police released.
Yeah, so they got a person of interest, only to then turn around and be like, nope, sorry, that guy wasn't actually the suspect, and then they released him. And it's also strange because, like, why is a dude from Wisconsin with many in the vicinity of Brown University anyway? But I guess it's America, so it is what it is. Like, I don't even understand. I don't even understand what is happening at this point. Like, these are the types of things that are supposed to not happen, okay? This is just not supposed to happen in any competent country, right? The FBI and Providence, Rhode Island Police Department are releasing new images of a person of interest in the massacre at Brown University. FBI is offering a reward up to $50,000 for information leading to the identification and arrest. They also don't actually pay those payouts famously. Live showing of the suspect right now.
But we begin with developing news in the campus.
Is it live? Give me the link.
At Brown University, the manhunt continues for the suspect who opened fire Saturday afternoon. This is video from Waterman Street in Providence as the police and FBI went door to door in their search for evidence and clues that might help them find the person responsible.
Meanwhile, we are learning more about the victims. They are 18-year-old Mohammed Aziz Omersakov, originally from Uzbekistan, but graduated high school in Chesterfield, Virginia, and 19-year-old Ella Cook from...
The reason why they're looking at the ground like that is because they're trying to see if there's a gun that they like disposed of or dumped or something. Okay, I'm not gonna watch this right now. I'll watch it after. I'll watch bits and pieces as they highlight after this press conference.
Birmingham, Alabama. Both were killed in the...
And a live look now in Providence, where we're awaiting a press conference from city officials with the latest update on the investigation. Of course, we will bring that press conference to you as soon as it begins.
But first, let's go live to Kim Kalunian, who's at Barris and Holly.
Yeah, they're looking for shells. They're looking for a gun. They're looking for whatever they can find.
Providence with an update. Kim?
Yeah, Mike and Shannon, it's been just over 48 hours since that deadly here on the campus of Brown University inside this building here behind us. And of course, we have a lot to cover as that investigation continues tonight. As we know, a suspect is still not in custody. And I want to get back to that video that we just received earlier this afternoon, this second clip of surveillance video showing who police describe as a person of interest. Now, they released this video earlier this afternoon showing this person of interest walking down Waterman Street in Providence on Saturday. Now, this video was taken less than a block from where we're standing right now.
Bro, this is literally the same as like, what the f going on? This reminds me of the Tyler Robinson situation, right? The alleged shooter at Charlie Kirk. Like what the hell is going on these campuses, man? Like, what is going on with the tools that these guys have at their disposal? Are all the resources just diverted to ICE? Is that what it is? Is that what's happening? Is Kash Patel like, no, sorry, we have to focus on doing dragnets in brown communities? Is that what it is? Can we bring woke back, dude? What the? Bring woke back right now. It seems like this anti-woke shit is not working out, okay? Because, like, as much as the people were mad about the previous FBI, right? Oh, they're going after my big, beautiful president for no reason. He's done nothing wrong, blah, blah, blah. They're so political. Clearly, whatever the Trump is doing, for every level of law enforcement and for all of the regulatory agencies, it has been disastrous. At least back in the day when someone did a mass or whatever, there was like a adequate response, you know? Obviously there were instances where the response was inadequate, like Uvalde or whatever, but like for the most part, they would, catch the guy, or the dude would just like kill himself, or cops would just like show up and then the dude would kill himself. That was happening. 2 high profile instances where they just got away on 2 different college campuses. What the fuck?
at the Barris and Holly building. Police tell us they do have additional surveillance video of that person of interest that they do hope to release, though it's unclear whether or not we will see that video at this upcoming press conference that we're expecting to begin in any minute. Now, in the same area where that surveillance video was recorded, we saw FBI evidence teams searching earlier today for what exactly is still unclear. They also raked and shuffled through the snow here outside the Brown University building where this took place. We saw them putting several items into evidence bags, but what those items are and again what those investigators were looking for is still really unknown at this time. Again, all of this as the suspect remains at large. Police releasing that person of interest they detained in Coventry late last night, saying they are still seeking information and videos that can help lead them to arrest. And today we're starting to learn more about the two victims who were killed in this, being identified by their communities as Mohammed Aziz Mirzakov, an aspiring neurosurgeon who is a freshman here at Brown University, and Ella Cook, the vice president of the school's Republican Club. She was a sophomore. Of course, the Brown University community and beyond is in mourning. And we also want to talk about those victims who are recovering. One has been released. 8 students are still in the hospital.
Jesus Christ, dude.
The man who had been detained as a person of interest in the deadly here that happened right in that building behind me with those white squares. That's the engineering building where 2 people were killed and 9 injured.
The other thing is, like, they were able to make sure that Kash Patel wasn't on camera somehow. I don't know how. Maybe he got the notice to just, like, shut the fuck up this time, right? Having said that, however, in spite of his notable absence from the media, it seems to me like the FBI still kind of fucked this up. I think it's the Rhode Island police that is like blaming the FBI for the information being released about the person of interest. Right? Is that what happened? I mean, he's gonna get fired, right? He has to get fired. His approvals are so low. Like, I know Trump loves how loyal Kash Patel is, seemingly, but I don't understand how he just like survives this as well.
Rhode Island's Attorney General says that the evidence now points in a different direction. Speaking overnight, the mayor of Providence acknowledged that authorities have no way of knowing if he is still in the area or has left the state.
We know that this is likely to cause fresh anxiety for our community. And we want to reiterate what we said earlier, which remains true, which is ever since the initial call, now a day and a half ago, we have not received any credible or specific threats to the Providence community.
Yes, person of interest and suspect are 2 different things. Yes. But that's precisely the reason why you don't reveal the name of a person of interest. Because a person of interest doesn't mean a suspect. So the very fact that it was already in the media and led discourse for 24 hours, like, this happened yesterday, okay? And as soon as they said, oh, we have the name of the person of interest, everyone in the chat was trying to tell me to dig into his background. What did I tell you? I said, this is simply a person of interest. I'm not going to prioritize digging into the background of this person because he might not be the guy that did it. Okay? If you recall, that's what I said yesterday. I said, I don't cover breaking news for this reason. There's a lot of... there's always a lot of misinformation that flies around. Oftentimes that misinformation is supposed to only fly around on Twitter. It's not supposed to fucking come from official organs of the government. It's not supposed to come from like the FBI or the police force. And it turns out later that night after I had gone offline, they released the person of interest. And we don't even know if he's still actually the suspect, for the record. But it seems like they released him because there's not enough evidence to tie him to this crime. He probably had a fucking solid alibi or something. I still don't even trust the government at this point. I don't trust the police force at this point to conduct a proper investigation. So it could very well still be that person, right?
All right, 2 students were killed, at least 9 others injured in the attack, which happened Saturday afternoon in a Principles of Economics review session. Surveillance footage shows someone who the police believe is the gunman wearing dark clothing leaving the university building where it has happened. Again, that's the street that we're standing on right now, Hope Street. CNN's Brian Todd is here with me with this breaking news, which just so radically changes the situation here at Brown this morning. Brian, what are you learning?
It is extraordinary, John, this turn of events where this person of interest, by the way, regarding whom they had gathered a lot of evidence. We were there all day yesterday at that hotel in Coventry when they were processing evidence for that person, now is released. The decision as to why they released it, the police chief, Oscar Perez, did speak about that. Here is some of what the police chief said about basically how they came to this decision last night.
This was a very complex investigation, and it still is. So in the sense, we followed on a lead, and we followed on a specific lead, but we were able to examine every single evidence that led us to this individual. And at that point, that's how investigations work. Investigations will tell us whether something is valid or not, whether something needs to be ruled out. It's not a mistake. It's just how investigations work.
And a couple of extraordinary things here, John. Number one, the mayor, Brent Smiley, saying last night they have no way of knowing whether the gunman is in the community or even in the state. And yet they are saying that there is no credible or no immediate threat to the community, and there's no need for a lockdown or no need for a shelter in place. Those two things.
What the fuck is that? Okay, so where is the guy then? Hey, I know that there was an acting that took place and they literally got away, but you don't need to worry. Don't worry about it. It's America after all, you know? A man can happen at any given moment anywhere, so it's just the normal it's the normal state of panic that you should have going to the fucking grocery store on any other day. Relax. What's the big deal? It's just one little okay? He didn't even kill 3, he killed 2. Technically it's not even a mash, okay? That's just how it goes. Police operate on Metal Gear Solid rules. Condition has returned to green. Yeah, they're like NPCs. They found bodies, but then after a state of panic, they went back to their regular routes. They forgot about it.
This may seem kind of incongruous here as this investigation continues, so we have to dig on this.
Oh, I'm sorry. They left my cone of sight. Must have been the wind-ass cops.
Is there any indication of where this gunman may be? It's extraordinary that they're saying they have no way of knowing whether this person is in the state or not. I think another question that we have to kind of dig on here that they're not giving a lot of answers to is the surveillance footage. Is there any more than that one piece of footage of the guy going around the corner? They did say there was very little or no footage from inside the building from that moment. So we have to kind of figure out, or hopefully the authorities will give us some clues as to whether there's more surveillance footage.
We just don't know what they have at this point or where they even begin. One thing that
is a stupid statement, but Rhode Island never ever gets mass shootings like ever. This is our second one in our entire history. The other one had no deaths, but still, I don't know what the fuck they're doing, acting like it's super safe.
We should make clear, they never publicly stated the name of this person of interest. This was something that was developed by CNN and other outlets via sources from inside there. But they were careful throughout the day about releasing information, but it turned out they just don't feel like they had the right guy. Brian Todd, great reporting on this. Obviously, a lot more to do. Thank you very much. With us now, CNN law enforcement.
Did they even find the gun? I don't think so. I don't know. I have no idea. There's reports saying he drove his car to the paint shop and the police lost all stars after.
Journalist Jonathan Wackrow. Jonathan, great to see you this morning. Let's start with where we are and where we're going.
Which is extra crazy. Like, I don't know what kind of gun he used, but like, how the fuck did he? I mean, the one of the direct witnesses, one of the victims, said he had a long barrel AR-15 style rifle. But he could have been wrong. They're saying it's a 9mm pistol, but one of the victims, the kid, one of the students who was supposed to be graduating, we just heard him say, guys, I know that it could have been an AR pistol that was that had customizations, or I mean, it could have been a 9mm handgun or a pistol that had customizations to make it look like a fucking long barrel rifle. Okay, but that is what one of the witnesses said. Okay, you can have a 9mm AR. The point is, we don't know. All we have is like some eyewitness testimony. And even that's like not super reliable.
So what now? I mean, after you have a person of interest in custody, you develop all this kind of evidence on that person, but it turns out you now believe he's not connected. What do you do?
Yeah, well, John, listen to that sigh of relief that authorities had announced when they stated that they had a person of interest in custody has really been replaced by this sobering reset in the entire investigation. And the reality is it brings investigators back to square one. They have no suspect in custody, and really they're not even intimating that they have somebody that they're even looking at. And the challenge is that as time goes on, this investigation gets significantly harder. So this is a really hard reset, going back to almost square one, where they have to go back and reassess every single lead that they had, right in the aftermath of the shooting, going back to reassessing all of the ballistic evidence, all of the digital leads, to the point that Brian Todd was making just a moment ago. They have to go back through that surveillance video and dig deeper. They have to dig deeper into the neighborhood, into the community, and anything that will give us a better image of who this suspect potentially.
Yeah, yesterday when people were trying to dig into about Benjamin Erickson's background or the suspected person of interest background, but we don't have any. We don't have any evidence right now that this person actually did it. This is just all speculation at this point. So I'm not going to dive into the background of some like random person potentially until officials confirm that this was the person, right? If they elevate this person from person of interest to suspect, dig into the background.
Breathe a little easier.
That's why you come to me when I'm covering the fucking news, okay? And not some random dickhead.
Is and where they're going. So
and even I might still get things wrong. So you should scrutinize what I'm doing as well. Everyone's trying to do their best.
Again, there is a monumental task ahead with a
But yeah, if you get your fucking notes from Laura Loomer, you're going to be wrong all the time. But in this current media environment, it doesn't even matter if you're wrong all the fucking time, as long as you're directionally wrong, and the way that you're wrong still confirms people's preconceived biases, their preconceived notions. It doesn't matter. Yeah, Liv Agar said, really important to emphasize the extent to which everyone believes in QAnon now, and I agree. I think everyone is fucking doing their own version of QAnon.
A lot of challenges around time, distance, and resources that are up against law enforcement investigators this morning.
And there is this reality, Jonathan. There's a killer on the run, on the loose right now. They have no one in custody. A lot of, I think, the atmosphere on campus yesterday was this sigh of relief that they had someone. People felt safer. I'm standing right on the street. That is the crime scene right behind me. No police cars within view. Some police tape there, though, right now. How safe is this city?
Well, listen, this is the challenge for public safety officials right now and university officials. What they must do is they must act on facts, not fear, while trying to keep the city functioning as they move this investigation forward. We said early on that there were a lot of indications that this attacker and this incident was a targeted attack against someone or the university in and itself. With that as the context and laid out by a lot of the attack dynamics, the fact that the students aren't there reduces that target profile. So our officials worried with real-time intelligence that there will be a secondary attack to that location or the city at large. Right now, they're not even indicating that they have any of that information. But the reality is that they need to act with precision in terms of what they're going to do with this investigation, not paralysis around how do they just lock everything down. Time has gone by now. We haven't seen any indication of a secondary threat or a targeted group that's working together.
I don't have a lot of evidence for this, but my suspicion is that we are relying on AI too much. I think that's I think our agencies, like law enforcement agencies and shit, are straight up demonstrating cognitive offloading and an over-reliance on artificial intelligence. And it's not the best idea, because AI is supposed to be utilized by the likes of United Healthcare to deny people coverage. It's supposed to not work perfectly. It's a way to abdicate and reduce the responsibility of like people, like real human beings that are doing the denial of care in a much more expedient manner. It's not supposed to be used when you have to work with 100% efficiency, if that makes sense. But then again, I don't know, and we won't find out until many years down the line, or we might not find out at all, as a matter of fact.
So with that in mind, investigators really have to move quickly through all of the evidence that they do have to ensure that they identify a suspect and bring that suspect into custody quickly.
The authorities said they had no idea if the person was in the city or even in the state. At this point, 36 hours after the incident, how far afield could this suspect be?
Again, immediately the shooter created that time and distance by evading police in the moments after the attack. And so the challenge for law enforcement is they allowed for potentially physical evidence to degrade. You look at digital signals will also go cold. And as they go back to re-interview witnesses, who many of which have now gone home for the holidays, the memories start fading. Those details that are really important in the aftermath of an incident around, maybe a particular gate that the person walked in, or the way that they comported themselves as they were walking through a hallway or out on the street, they start losing that fidelity. So it puts investigators up to a significant challenge on how are they going to reset this investigation. And final point here, John, is in the immediate aftermath, we saw this surge of federal, state, and local resources all converging on Brown University, right where you're standing. Look around; they're not there anymore. So the challenge is with this monumental task of resetting the investigation, their resources are limited right now, and they have to rebuild those resources to lead this investigation forward.
All right, John.
More on this from Mayor of Providence, Brett Smiley. Mayor Smiley, thank you for joining us this morning. Let's start with the investigation. Why was this person of interest released? What more can you tell us?
So we continued to examine evidence after this individual had been detained. As you might have heard from the Attorney General late last night here in Rhode Island, it takes time to run this evidence. It takes time to process information that was collected and hard evidence that was collected. And as we continued to process that evidence, it was determined that this person of interest needed to be released, and we continue with our investigation. To be clear, we've never stopped our investigation. The Providence Police and our partners at State Police, the FBI, and others have continuously run down leads and worked this case beyond the person of interest who had been detained yesterday.
So you're absolutely convinced the person of interest had nothing to do with this?
We're not saying that definitively. What we're saying is that after a review of the evidence that was gathered, it was determined that the person of interest needed to be released. But until such time as we have an individual in custody who we're confident is responsible, that we're prepared to press charges and then prosecute, we're going to continue to leave all doors open.
Remember what I said about the person of interest, like earlier today, that he still might be the suspect? Yeah, 15 minutes ago. That could still very well be the case, okay? It doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like it from the videos that they've released so far, but I don't know what this bump is. This bump could be his belly, or it could be like a bag that he had inside of his jacket that was carrying like ammunition potentially, or he could be MPreg, could be his vest, but a vest wouldn't dangle this low, I don't think, or it could be just fat. I think it's crazy.
Until such time as that we're in a place where we feel confident that we've got the right person, but for now, the person of interest who had been detained has been released.
You said individual. Are you pretty convinced this was a lone shooter?
We are, as you have seen many times, we do have a small short clip of video footage that we do believe is the person that we're looking for. And right now we don't have any evidence to suggest that it was more than that individual which has been seen in that video.
Are you confident the campus is secure right now and all the students are safe?
We have an enhanced police presence both on campus and throughout the city of Providence today to provide that confidence and assurance to not just just the students on campus, but all the residents in my city. And ever since the initial shooting occurred, that first call that came in at 4:05 a day and a half ago, we have not received a single credible call for threat of violence or any sort of information to believe that there is an ongoing threat in any specific credible way. And so we understand that there is a high degree of anxiety, and after this individual was released last night, I understand that that anxiety level has risen in our community. But it's no different than a day ago, which is that we've continue to receive
It's pretty crazy how shitty things have gotten and how quickly the enshittification is taken root. Like, things weren't exactly going in a positive trajectory in America before Donald Trump, but it is somewhat impressive that it took like 12 months. It's wild. Like, think about what your attitude was. Like, think about where you were before Donald Trump became president. It wasn't great. It wasn't exactly hopeful. But Donald Trump came in with fucking lighter fluid, dude. It's so insane. He is the accelerant to the demise of America, the demise of American empire.
Zero credible threats to our community, Brown or the broader community. And so we have an enhanced police presence to try to give that comfort, that sense of security, and the search and the investigation is ongoing.
Does the evidence suggest this was a student or someone from off campus?
We can't comment on that, and we're exploring all possible leads.
Mayor, thank you for...
Are we talking about 2016 or 2024 Trump term? No. I think 2024 has been different. I was there in 2016. I think Trump won. There were a lot of setbacks. There were a lot of hurdles. There was a sense that people wanted to return to normalcy, and that attitude never really shifted, and it became so overwhelming that Donald Trump lost the election in 2020, right? In 2024, Donald Trump basically went back to the drawing board and decided, oh no, I mustn't have any competence in my administration, only loyalty. And when you place a higher value on loyalty over competence, and also you have maximalist goals in terms of deregulation, in terms of destroying the regulatory apparatus, in terms of cutting jobs at the federal level, for example, and put people who are simply loyal but dullards in positions of power like Kash Patel and whatnot, this is what you arrive at. When you do dumbass chud DEI, okay, while simultaneously making it seem as though you're on a conquest to bring about meritocracy finally to America, to the American project, this is the response. This is the result. And it, I think, bricks people's confidence in the government. For all of the back and forth, for all of the discourse around the FBI's biases or whatever, I think there was still a degree of confidence that the average American had with these agencies. Okay? Even if they thought, oh, they're using the federal law enforcement in this sinister way against my big beautiful president Donald Trump, who should still be president, whatever. Like, there was still, when the FBI came out and released a statement, people were like, okay, we trust them. I don't think anybody trusts the FBI anymore. Because no matter what the FBI's political agenda might be, right, there was still a level of stability when it came down to, investigating crimes such as this, okay? You keep saying meritocracy. I thought meritocracy meant educated people are in power. I'm so confused. No, I'm saying that they're lying about the abolition of DEI. Like, they said that they were going to bring about a meritocratic process, claiming that the previous process did not actually hire the most competent people, but simply the blackest individuals or the brownest individuals on the virtue of their ethnicity or how gay they were or whatever. They were saying that the libs were doing DEI, right? Ironically enough, the only time where DEI has ever existed in this country, like DEI in the way that conservatives present it, is for white men. Like, there has never been a moment in American history where DEI, in the way that Republicans say is DEI, when people are elevated into positions without actually doing the work prior to get to that position. There's never been a moment in American history where that has worked in favor of like black and brown individuals. Okay? As a matter of fact, the reason why diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives were implemented was to basically overcome those previous hurdles that black and brown individuals had to basically fight against so that they were not overlooked. Same principle behind affirmative action. And no, I'm not saying white women either, because no, it was specifically for white men for the longest time. Black, brown, men and women, and white women as well, were overlooked in the workplace and were not allowed to enter the workforce until, you know, a couple decades ago. No, not white, rich white men, poor white men. I'm talking about like 50s, 60s, okay? That was DEI. That's the way that conservatives talk about DEI. That literally was DEI. They're just mostly mad that that concept has changed a little bit. You know, back in the old days, when your boomer parents talk about a strong handshake was all that was necessary to be hired for a job where you could get a fucking pension. That was unironically what these guys were talking about when they talk about DEI, okay? Yeah, eye contact and a strong handshake, brother. Yeah, it was like, because most of the workforce was not even looked at for those positions, let's be real. In any case, conservatives did turn around and implement that principle now, claiming that it was but by their own admission or by their own anger towards DEI, they're literally doing DEI for Trump loyalists. And this is the result. Kash Patel is the result of Trump DEI.
Welcome to Huberman Lab Essentials, where we revisit past episodes for the most potent and actionable science-based tools for mental health, physical health, and performance. I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. This podcast is separate from my teaching and research roles at Stanford. It is, however, part of my desire and effort to bring zero cost to consumer information about science and science-related tools to the general public. Today, I want to talk about something that is vitally important for not just athletic performance, but for your entire life and indeed for your longevity, and that's muscle. And one of the things that's exquisite and fantastic about the human brain is that it can direct all sorts of different kinds of movement, different speeds of movement of different durations. All of that is governed by the relationship between the nervous system.
The first rule of being an A-list streamer is brutal, but simple. Once you turn the camera on, you never get to turn it off. To the world, he's XQC, one of the most watched, highest paid personalities on the planet.
XQC is the biggest streamer on Twitch.
The fame, the 9-figure deals, the constant roar of 40,000 live viewers. From the outside, it looks like the ultimate success story. But that is not the story you're about to see. This story is much darker. Because sometimes you get everything you ever wanted, just to lose everything that ever mattered.
You get nothing. You're a victim here.
Now, every story about a downfall starts somewhere, and for XQC, it started at the top. Felix Lengyel was a professional gamer turned full-time streamer. Online, he went by XQC, and by early 2018, he'd already built a massive following. Over 200,000 people followed him on Twitch, and every night, thousands tuned in just to watch the madness unfold.
Nobody will ever do it.
XQC was the definition of an internet troll. He talked weird, said whatever popped into his head, and yeah, he wasn't exactly the cleanest guy around, but that's not really the point, because he could make quite literally anything entertaining. Back then, the magic was in his reactions. It really didn't matter what happened. Dying in game, getting stream saved, some annoying TTS donation. He'd explode, lose his mind, and somehow make it hilarious. But over time, the chat started catching on. They realized that the more they pushed him, the better content got. So it kind of became this game. Who could piss him off the most? Who could get the biggest reaction? Every week, the stunts got worse, and what started as harmless trolling was slowly turning into something mean. The line between the stream and real life was starting to blur. And in about 2 seconds, someone was about to take it too far.
I'm coming out. Yes. What? Hands up.
For the first time in his life, Felix found himself staring down the barrels of a few standard-issue LAPD Glocks. A viewer from his stream had found his home address and called the police, reporting a violent threat. This is known as swatting. It's an internet prank that's gotten people killed before. And for Felix, this was the moment that changed everything. He realized that being live meant being exposed. That anyone with a grudge or a twisted sense of humor could reach through the screen and make his real life collapse in seconds. So he started closing doors. No more personal details, no leaks, no risks. His addresses, his circle, and even what he said on stream, all of it got locked down. From that point forward, XQC was split in two. There was the version everyone knew, the chaotic, high-energy streamer who seemed to live entirely alone. And then there was the other side, the one he kept completely off camera. That's where this story gets interesting, because what the internet thought they were watching wasn't real life. It was a reflection stitched together from a million half-truths. What was actually happening behind the scenes is a whole different story. With Felix's address being leaked online, he realized he needed to move. He left his apartment and moved in temporarily with the girl he had met just a few months ago. Her name was Sammy, a fellow streamer in the Overwatch community, better known as Adept. With a new setup and a new apartment, Felix once again went live.
It's what time is it? 10? I think it's time to go again.
And from the outside, nothing looked wrong. If anything, it looked better than usual.
Working boys or what?
He was streaming more than ever, laughing more than ever, making more money than ever.
Does that look like a shark?
Every month, the numbers continued to climb. The chat was bigger, the clips were everywhere, and Twitch was basically becoming his playground. Eventually, Felix found a new place, something more permanent, and Adept moved in with him. Online, they insisted they were just roommates, but whenever they were on stream together, they didn't exactly look like just roommates.
Fix these right up. Oh my god, he really did.
It was kind of sweet. Two streamers building a life off of the same madness. They'd joke on stream, sometimes argue a little, but the infinitely parasocial chat would eat it up. It felt like a look into his real life. And maybe that's why nobody thought twice when things seemed off. If he changed rooms, it was just a new setup. If he ended the stream early, chat blamed the bad sleep schedule. Little things you only notice when you already know how the story ends. From 2020 to 2022, it was the golden run. XQC became Twitch's poster boy. He was the single most watched streamer for 3 years in a row. He'd go live for 10 hours a day, grinding some random game or reacting to whatever was trending, then go to sleep, wake up, and do it again the next day. On the surface, XQC was living the perfect life. He had the fame, the dream car, the $1 million mansion, and the cherry on top of it all, Felix and Sammy finally told their fans what everyone already knew. They were dating. Everyone watching thought, damn, XQC's living the dream. And for a while, maybe he was. But in reality, everything was falling apart. To understand why everything went wrong, we need to rewind all the way back to 2018. After moving in with Adept, the swattings didn't just magically go away. Somehow, within weeks, his address kept getting moved online. And once it was out there, it was only a matter of time before the police showed up at his door.
Actually, get me the f*** out of here, man. I'm so f***ing done with all of it, man. Holy sh**. Y'all get the f*** out of here, dude. I'm about to, man. I don't want to live anymore. It's retarded.
Felix learned fast. After those first incidents, he made sure it never happened live again. No cameras, no chat reactions, nothing for the trolls to feed on.
We'll be on the move for a little bit, but it'll be fine. I'm not gonna talk about it too much. It's whatever.
But every time he thought he'd found a safe spot, something would slip. One day he'd be streaming from one place, and the next, somewhere completely different.
I'll find a way to get my stuff somewhere I can keep it safe. I'll find a way.
Sometimes he'd crash at a friend's house, or head back to Montreal to stay with his parents until he could find a new place. But none of it really felt safe.
Almost every day, the police came to our house with a full squad. I was generally scared that I was going to die.
Now, anyone near him, Sammy, friends, family, were in danger solely because he was there with them.
Just me being around people, like, endangers them. It's just kind of, like, unfair for others.
And the worst part, there wasn't really anything he could do about it. The more famous he got, the bigger the audience became, and the more dangerous that 1% of it became too.
I don't know what the f*** is wrong with you guys. I don't know what the f*** is wrong with you absolute degenerates.
Moving became routine. Every so often came a new house with a new setup, and each time it looked the same, a plain, empty bedroom.
I just thought, if I purchase a home, and I'm the only person on the title, it's my home, I thought, what could possibly go wrong? And sometimes I realize, like, it just doesn't matter, dude. I can't have shit.
Whether he had an actual setup or not, he'd start streaming regardless. He simply wasn't going to let that 1% of viewers ruin it for the other 99. Over time, he would slowly but surely fill the space. Sometimes it was posters on the wall, or adding a bed, cool lights, or maybe some plants to the stream room. But it seemed like the minute it actually started to feel like a home, like someone actually lived there, the cycle restarted.
okay, well, I guess we'll move again. And we'll start it again. And hopefully, and it's probably gonna blow up again.
After a while, you could see it wearing on. The sleep deprivation, the junk food, the constant anxiety, it all started to pile up. Somewhere in that blur of streams and relocations, the pressure began to break through.
XQC is, if you watch his content, renowned for being really, really bad at sleeping.
X has night terrors where he runs through the house screaming.
Felix started having night terrors, real physical ones.
This morning, I was bloody. Yeah, I did have a fight, actually.
Ow, that's crazy. When he wakes up to that, do you freak out, Adept? It doesn't scare you?
He'd wake up gasping, disoriented, spreading across the room trying to escape something that wasn't there.
And so, oh my god.
I just wake up with no air, and I just run. Dude, there's like holes in the wall because of it. Dude, look, there's one above the bed. Look at that. Literally ran straight into the wall.
Whether he was with Adept or staying with friends, they would have to pull him out of it before he hurt himself. But sometimes he didn't wake up fast enough.
I woke up and I hurt myself in panic. That's all. So I don't really know what happened. But it should be fine for now, though.
And even then, the very next day he was still alive. Because for Felix, stopping meant thinking. And thinking was worse.
In a way, when I go live, I have my own little sun, or my little spotlight above my head, right? Recently it's been like, spotlight goes off, and it's just darkness.
At one point, after years of this cycle, things got so bad that he started writing a will. He genuinely wasn't sure how much longer he'd last if things kept going the same way.
I had a bunch of bad thoughts. Things kept happening that were really bad and scary. I felt like I wasn't gonna live very long.
When he began going through what he had and figuring out where it should all go, it naturally fell to his family. But one name wasn't there, Adept's. And when she found out, everything blew to Kingdom Come. This was the start of something that would turn into one of the most bizarre and public breakups the internet had ever seen.
After that, things just kind of like started like blowing the f*** up, you know?
When Adept found out she wasn't included in Felix's will, the tension between them began to boil over.
Why are you raising your tone?
Because
you're raising your tone.
Really annoying.
You're raising your tone.
Like, I'm tired of hiding behind this that you do every time.
Okay, can you understand that I always do this, and it's not target?
Oh God, here we go.
What started as a couple's argument slowly grew into something much bigger, one that pulled in Felix's family and refused to fade.
Simi, you called my family psycho, crazy, conniving ass crack. I blamed myself. You talked to me for 3 hours, blaming everybody else.
I do this with you anymore. You are not a victim here. You have never been a victim here. I'm done speaking with you. You are not a victim. Stop victimizing yourself.
I'm sorry. This got too heavy. I'm sorry. Bye.
Over the next few months, things only got worse. Arguments kept resurfacing, and every attempt to fix things seemed to just make it worse.
God, you're so cringe.
Sorry. See? Classic. Just like before the stream, you say an argument, or say a remark, and you leave, and then you're like, got him, dude. It's not how it works, though.
Eventually, Felix felt like he was cornered, like he had to choose just one, family or Adept.
I was cornered into choosing between family and Sammy, and unfortunately what happened is that I kind of just chose family.
And that decision set off everything that came next.
Why are no other streamers talking about XQC divorce? Like how major it is. This ain't like some little thing. Like this is major. This is having an impact on him psychologically.
After a string of public arguments and tense on-stream moments, Adept took things a step further. She filed a claim saying this wasn't just a breakup. According to her, she and Felix were married under common law, which meant she was entitled to half of everything he owned. Within weeks, the dispute moved from live streams to courtrooms. In Texas, official filings started rolling in, and the court stepped in to stabilize the situation while it played out. Adept was granted exclusive use of Felix's BMW and Tesla. Felix, on the other hand, was suddenly restricted. No more luxury spending, no gambling, nothing beyond the essentials. They were barred from entering each other's homes, and more importantly, forbidden from talking about any of it online. Essentially, a gag order. Once again, Felix was split in two, the version everyone thought they knew, and the one left behind when the camera turned off. But this time, the internet filled the void. Today, those court records are sealed, but back then, they were open to anyone who knew where to look. A few creators dug them up before they vanished behind closed doors, and with each new filing, the internet got another glimpse into the story Felix couldn't tell himself.
Hey guys.
How's it going?
What's going on?
This is Stephen Asarch, a journalist who's written for outlets like Business Insider and Rolling Stone. But more importantly, he was one of the first people to break this whole story.
The common law marriage itself always seemed really odd to me. Her only evidence behind the common law marriage was in 2020, they went to Canada and they told the TSA that they were married because that was the only way they were going to get in because of COVID protocols.
A common law marriage basically means you're married without the ceremony or license. There's just 3 requirements. You have to live together, tell people you're married, and both agree that you are. But miss one of those, and it doesn't count.
Felix has never publicly made any sort of statement that the common law marriage was in fact real.
I'm not married!
I don't want to bash Adept. I don't want to just say she was grasping at straws.
It is hard to discuss this story without thinking ill of Adept, because if you just look at the court filings, it does seem fairly malicious.
Her whole document was all about, I need spousal support, make them pay.
But, taking her opinion into account, it was clear that she felt that she kind of built this guy up and kind of helped him reach the level that he reached.
Speaking of crazy deals, XQC, one of the biggest streamers on Twitch, just took a 2-year deal, $100 million with Kick.
Wow.
Everyone, when it came to XQC, was focused on the Kick deal.
What is going on?
$100 million.
This is a non-exclusive contract for 2 years, meaning XQC gets to have his cake, eat it too, and the baker.
It was and still is the biggest streaming deal social media has ever seen. Yet, somehow, it came right when XQC seemed to be at his lowest.
I understand that XQC can kind of feel slighted by all of this. Right. I was watching the Impulsive clip earlier, and clearly, this still kind of bothers him.
Felix, I gotta ask you this. Are you going to give all of your money to your ex-girlfriend?
Oh, man.
Adept, the person who had been in his life for years, was now the person tearing it apart.
The deeper you are invested with somebody, the deeper that you trust them, the harder betrayal will feel when it happens.
What started as a conversation about his will, about money, and what would happen if something went wrong, spiraled into something much bigger. And somewhere along the way, Felix lost someone that felt like home.
I wasn't the best boyfriend at times, but I don't think anybody deserves to feel that level of betrayal ever.
The fallout rolled straight into his family. Words were said, lines were crossed, and even months later, things still hadn't really healed. So he did what he always does when everything falls apart. He streamed, because chat was the only thing that still felt familiar.
At the end of the day, all I want to do is go back to this. I don't want to spend time enjoying the thing that this comes with, right? The status, or whatever. All that shit is it's just noise. It actually is, it's noise.
Sometimes he'd go live and talk in circles, half-coded rants about things that he couldn't say. You could tell he wanted to open up, he just couldn't. And the longer that went on, the lonelier it looked.
Money just changes people, man. And people say it's changed me. You wanna know why? You wanna do something about me? Everybody around me, that's all they cared about. It's just money. When everybody around me starts thinking about it so much, right? Then it annoys me. Then there's me right here, everybody's next to me, and then everybody's looking past me to whatever I have. And it's okay, well, how do I get the focus back on me? I'll just burn it then. That's kind of logical conclusion almost. Sometimes it feels like I'd have none of the problems I have right now if it wasn't for that.
Over time, the streams got shorter and less consistent, but the outbursts and the drama grew. It was like watching someone set fire to the parts of their life that still worked.
I didn't change for the longest time, and it felt like that's all people wanted. So yeah, I bought really dumb shit. I wasted money on the stupidest thing I could ever find. I would rather see that money go up in flames on useless than being given to people that's all they care about.
After months of filings, restrictions, and silence, it finally ended. The court dismissed the case. The claims were dropped. No more orders, no more waiting. For the first time in nearly a year, Felix could finally speak again.
They just gave me the news that I was no longer in any significant legal battle, and it's all over. After months and months sitting in the dark, I actually had something or somebody tell me and validate that my brain was rooted in reality.
In the end, Felix never really escaped the chaos. He just stopped letting it define him. The cameras are still there. The chat still moves a mile a minute. But he's not hiding behind it anymore. When he goes live, it's not to fill the silence. It's because he actually wants to be there. The line between XQC and Felix will probably always exist. But for the first time, it doesn't feel like a mask. It feels more of like a balance. He can log off, disappear for a while, and the world keeps spinning. The stream doesn't have to be his whole life anymore. And maybe that's the real win. Not the contracts, not the numbers, not the record-breaking deals, but finally being okay with just being himself.
Just before we get started with today's video, a quick word from our fantastic sponsor, Vessi. Vessi make waterproof shoes that are so much more than just waterproof shoes. They are the most comfortable waterproof shoes that you'll ever wear, and they're not just water resistant is something people water resistant shoes. Sure, I've heard of those. You know, the rain goes on them and it's fine. But no, these are water resistant, like a pair of wellies or rain boots or that kind of thing. You know, up until here, you could put this in a stream. Up until this point, just dip it in, and as long as it doesn't go over the top, your socks will remain dry. It's through the magic of something called Dymatex. By the way, this is the Stormburst shoe. It's cold here now. It's early December. Right now, is it? Oh no, it's late November. It hasn't quite clocked over yet. But it's really cold, it's snowy, and I like wearing my Stormburst out and about, and they just have excellent grip on the bottom. These are really clean because these are my kind of pair that I used to show you guys. I have a white pair, actually, and a black pair, and this is the grey. I've got a lot of Vessies. They're fantastic. They're just the best shoes you could wear. And this month, if you buy with Vessi, you get a free pair of their forecast gloves, which I got a notification are on their way. You will see B-roll of me wearing them now, but I haven't quite got them yet. If I'm giving a thumbs up in the B-roll, that means I liked them. They're wind resistant, they're touchscreen friendly, they're actually warm, so now your hands get the upgrade too. Go to vessi.com/shadows and get 15% off your first order and get those gloves while you're at it. No stress, 1-year warranty, 30-day returns, free shipping over $110. Give someone something useful or gift them to yourself. And now today's video. Bob Ernst was 59 years old, a man in the prime of his life. He was a marathon runner, a fitness enthusiast, the kind of guy who took care of himself. If you were a runner, you know the knees, they're often the first thing to complain. Bob had arthritis. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was a constant nagging passenger in his life. It was pain. And pain, as anyone who lives with it knows, is pretty exhausting. So when his doctor told him about a new medication, a breakthrough...
Today, I'm going to share 3 stories that each have a very iconic, disturbing photograph that is tethered to that story. And at the end of each of these stories, I'll show you that photo. And some of these photos are truly astounding. But before we get into those stories, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do. So, if that's of interest to you, please offer to host the like button at your house for a big dinner party. But when they show up, don't let them inside. Instead, simply tar and feather them. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's stories. On the morning of October 21st, 1990, a 30-year-old man named Lee Hunsho and 3 of his friends hiked up Bilu Mountain, which is located in northern Taiwan. Now, by this point, the group had already been hiking for several hours, and so they were quite tired. I mean, Lee's legs absolutely burned, but Lee and the others kept on pushing until they reached the top of this rocky ridge. They all stopped and were able to catch their breath for a minute. So Lee was a bank manager, but he was also a very outdoorsy person, and he'd been wanting to do this hike up Bilu Mountain for a long time because it was sort of like a rite of passage for hikers in Taiwan. It took an average of almost 8 hours to get to the top and back down again, and the terrain could be really rough. As a result, it was considered one of the most challenging hikes in all of Taiwan. But despite that, it was also a major tourist destination that was usually really busy, with lots of people attempting to do this hike. But on this particular day, for whatever reason, the friends had not seen anybody else on this trail. No one. And I mean, the weather was good, it was a weekend, I mean, there was really no good reason for nobody to be here. They had the mountain to themselves. So Lee and his friends, they stood on this rocky ridge and caught their breath, they had some water, they had a couple of snacks, and then it was onward because they were not at the summit yet. I mean, this was a beautiful lookout point they were at, but they still had some pretty difficult climbing ahead. And so on they went, very excitedly. They're making their way towards the top. This is something they were all really excited about. And eventually they reached the section of the mountain that was sort of famous amongst tourists because it was a really, really steep section where the only way to get up was actually to climb a rope. There was a rope anchored into the mountain where, hikers had to grab the rope and walk and pull themselves up this section. It was like this kind of cool part that made you feel really rugged. And so when the men got to the spot, they all wanted to make sure there was a picture of them navigating this particular terrain. And so one by one, each of the men got on the rope and sort of paused at some point and turned around and made sure to get a cool picture of themselves making this really difficult section of the climb. And then once they had all taken a picture, they actually went the rest of the way up the rope and continued all the way up to the summit. And once they were on the summit, the friends actually didn't spend a whole lot of time there. I mean, remember, it takes almost 8 hours to do this entire round trip. And so you're sort of fighting against the darkness. You want to get back down before the sun goes down. And so they were up there long enough to get a couple of pictures and, again, to take stock of the fact that basically no one is here. In fact, literally, nobody is here but them. It just seems sort of surreal. This is such a beautiful place, such a popular place. Why is nobody here? But didn't matter. They got their pictures, they got their beautiful scenery, they had some more water and snacks, and then they began making their descent. Now, on the way up, the friends had all been together. There was no separation. They were all, one by one, navigating each part of the terrain and making their way up together. But on the return trip, they got pretty separated, in part because Lee was really dragging behind. He was just so tired from the ascent that he sort of told the others, like, hey, go ahead, like you can walk ahead of me. We all know where we're going down and we'll meet at the car, so just go on ahead. And so Lee's friends had done just that. They had sort of taken off and gotten a bit of a lead on Lee. And so after a couple of hours of the group sort of broken up, making their way down the mountain, the friends in the front, who had left Lee behind effectively, they stopped at a certain point and they realized like they were really huffing it down the mountain, moving really quickly. And they thought, you know what? Lee was really tired up there. Maybe we ought to just sit here and wait for a minute and let him catch up, and then we'll make the final stretch together. And so the friends, they stop. And again, they're sort of looking around thinking how weird it is that nobody else is here but them. Like still, no one's come up the mountain. No one's come down the mountain. It's just them. It's very odd. They're sitting there waiting and they're looking back up the trail, expecting Lee to show up anytime, but he doesn't. And so eventually one of the friends says, you know what, you guys stay here. I'm gonna go back up the mountain a little ways and just see if I can catch Lee and just walk with him back down. I'm sure he's just exhausted and, I'll help him sort of finish up the hike here. And so this one friend, he begins going back up the trail. And for quite a while, he's basically hiking back up the mountain. And the whole time he's expecting he's gonna run into Lee. He has to. I mean, there were other trails that spidered off on the way down. So it was possible to take a wrong turn and sort of accidentally go down the wrong path. But for the most part, it was pretty linear. But as he's going up, he has not found Lee. And after a while, he's been hiking for like an hour back up the mountain and still no Lee. And he thinks, you know what, I can't do this. It's getting dark out. I have to go back and catch up with the other friends and just go down to the car, because at this point, it seems pretty likely that Lee must have gotten turned around and he must have taken one of those other pathways. And now he's probably ahead of me. He's probably down at the car by this point. And so this friend who had done the rescue mission turned around, went back down, linked up with the other friends that were still sitting there waiting for him. Together, they walked all the way down the trail and they got to the car. And when they got there, they're expecting to see Lee, but he wasn't there. And by now, the sun had basically set. And so the friends realized that, okay, like we have a real problem here. I mean, clearly Lee didn't just get lost. He's still on the mountain somewhere. And like, what are we gonna do? It's about to be nighttime. Like, we can't go up there looking for him. And so they hopped in their car and they drove to the nearest police station to tell them to go look for Lee. And sure enough, there would be this huge search that was launched for Lee. And over the coming week, I mean, there were all these people out scouring the mountain looking for Lee, but they couldn't find him. And after a week of searching, the police had to call it off. And so Lee's friends and family were left with this huge question. Like, where did he go? What happened to him? I mean, the not knowing was in some ways worse than having found out he had died or something. And so there's this horrible uncertainty. Nobody really knows how to react to this. Do you grieve his loss now, or do you hold out hope that maybe he's still alive? Well, the friends and family kind of did the latter. They kind of held out hope that, maybe he's out there somewhere. Weeks turned into months, and eventually 4 months went by. And it was at that point that other hikers who were making their way up the mountain, they went off the trail on purpose. They were sort of off the trail for a bit, and they came across Lee's body. Now, the immediate reaction was obviously devastation for Lee's family and friends. but at least it seemed like they were going to get closure about what actually happened to Lee. However, when police began to investigate what actually killed Lee and why, they ran into a lot of anomalies. Number one, they did an autopsy and they couldn't figure out what killed him. There was no clear cause of death. Number two, where he was found, he was just kind of sitting there, with his back against the mountain. His pack was right next to him. It almost seemed like he just sat down and then just died in place. But again, there's no clear cause of death. There was no obvious, trauma he sustained. It certainly didn't seem like he fell. He didn't appear to have any obvious injuries. He just stopped at some point on the mountain and died. And on top of that, remember, Lee is like a seasoned climber. He had supplies in his bag that could at least last him for some time. He had a flashlight, he had a compass. He knew where he needed to go, down the mountain to the car. Why is he stopping? Again, no injuries, no clear injuries. Why is he stopping right there until he dies? It just didn't add up. But then there was another very strange development that sort of took the story in a totally new direction. One of the friends who was with Lee on that dune title, the one who had the camera that took pictures of all of them climbing up that rope and took pictures up on the summit, he went and got his pictures developed shortly after Lee had been found dead. And when he went through the photos from their trip, he could not believe what he found. Here is the photo of Lee posing with that rope. And if you notice, at the top of this segment, there's a person clearly up there looking down at Lee and his friends. But remember, they didn't see anybody else on the mountain the entire time they were there. And they certainly did not see that appears to be a young girl in a red jacket, right at the top of the segment they were in when they were taking those photos. They didn't see her. They would have absolutely communicated with her, but they didn't see her. And so they have this photo of this girl in Lee's picture, but she wasn't in any of the other photos. She was just in Lee's. And making this even stranger is there was this myth about this mountain, that there were these spirits on this mountain that would sometimes target hikers and lead them astray away from their friends off the trail, where effectively they would die. And wouldn't you know it, it seemed an awful lot like Lee was led astray and just sort of sat down and died on the mountain shortly after that picture captured this girl in red looking down at him. BetterHelp is the paid partner of today's video. As an adult, I have found the holiday season can sometimes be sort of depressing. And I think the reason for that is nostalgia. I find myself looking back at my childhood when I had no responsibilities and I basically just got to pay and in time, stuck. On the morning of August 8th, 2024, a 48-year-old Russian woman named Ludmila Lazarenko sat on the floor of a bungalow deep in the Amazon rainforest in Peru. The bungalow was small and mostly just for sleeping, but it was connected to a communal kitchen and dining space. Ludmila sat right in the middle of the bungalow on the floor, with her eyes closed and her legs crossed, and she was trying to meditate, but the sounds of the birds and the insects outside in the rainforest, plus the sound of her friend, Ivan Kuzmin, who was moving around in the attached kitchen, were making it hard for her to concentrate. And so Ludmila finally gave up on meditating for right now, and she opened her eyes and she looked out towards the kitchen, and she saw her friend, Ivan, who was 38 years old and from Ukraine, and he was busy brewing some tea. So Ludmila and Ivan genuinely were just platonic friends. In fact, Ludmila, she was married and had 2 kids, but she was out here alone. She and Ivan were actually part of what was a retreat out in the Amazonian rainforest with other people from all over the world who would come out here to meditate in nature and do some soul searching and hopefully come back to their regular lives with some additional perspective. Now, Ludmila and Ivan had been going to retreats like this for the better part of 2 years, and that was actually how the two had met each other. And so they were just friends. They had this similar interest in going to retreats like this one. But there was one aspect of these retreats that really is the thing that drew Ludmila and Ivan out to the rainforest. It was not just to sit in nature and just hope for the best. They would go to these ayahuasca retreats, where basically they were led through this meditative process where they would drink this very special tea that would sort of affect you in different ways. And, some people believed it sort of led you on this spiritual journey where, it's just this very powerful, soul-searching event where you come out of this thing feeling like a different person. You know, if you've had trauma in your life, or you have, you know, post-traumatic stress, or maybe you have trauma in your life that you're not even aware of, you know, going through this style of retreat, these ayahuasca retreats, people have said has been very powerful and transformative. And Ludmila, you know, she lived a pretty typical life back home. You know, she's a very busy mom and a wife, and she found doing these retreats really offered her a big reset. You know, she felt like it was the one chance for her to kind of disconnect from responsibility and just be at peace. And Ivan, for the most part, felt very much the same way. I mean, he came to these retreats for similar reasons for his own life. And so here they are, they're out in the rainforest, and, you know, they're brewing up some tea, some ayahuasca tea, and they're in this bungalow, and they're getting ready to have this sort of meditative journey, but they were about to break a very important rule. So the man who ran this particular retreat out in this part of the rainforest, he made it explicitly clear to everybody who came out there that no matter how many times you've come to these retreats or similar retreats, you never, ever drink the ayahuasca without a shaman present. Basically, without somebody else there to sort of help guide you through this process. If you were to do it on your own, who knows what could happen? And so everybody knew you cannot do this on your own. But Ludmila and Ivan, they felt like, you know what, I get it. You know, we're not supposed to do that. We know that. But we've done this so many times and we know what we're doing. So let's just brew up some ayahuasca of our own, and we'll stay in our bungalow and we'll drink it ourselves. We'll have our own experience. Nobody will even know. And so that's what Ivan was doing in the kitchen. He was making ayahuasca tea. And when he was done, he grabbed 2 mugs of this tea. He walked back over to Ludmila, who was in the bungalow section. He sat down next to her. They drank their tea, and they both laid down on the ground and closed their eyes. A couple of hours later, the director of this retreat, who at the time was directing some group meditation not very far away from the bungalow where Ivan and Ludmila were, he was doing this group meditation when he heard a loud scream, and it was coming from somewhere near the bungalows. And instinctively, he got up, he abandoned the group he was with, and he ran to the scream. And he saw one of his staff members. She was the one who screamed, and she was standing looking into the bungalow where Ivan and Ludmila were. And so the director rushes over and gets right next to this woman, and he looks into the bungalow, and immediately he knew 2 things. One, he knew for a fact these 2, Ivan and Ludmila, had broken the rule. They had taken ayahuasca without a shaman present. And 2, they had paid a horrible, horrible price. So ayahuasca is not just some herbal tea. It is a very powerful hallucinogen. And that's the whole point. People go out into the rainforest for these retreats and drink this hallucinogen in order to basically have perspective on their lives that you can only get by, introducing this chemical and causing yourself to hallucinate. People talk about almost seeing themselves from the outside looking in, and like having this deeply spiritual event where you come out of your trip, that's what it's called, feeling like, oh my goodness, I know myself better now because of the hallucinations I just went through. But critically, the reason you have to have a shaman present in these retreats is really for safety. Because sometimes when you take ayahuasca, you have a bad trip where you have all these hallucinations, but they're of horrible, terrifying things, but you can't differentiate them from reality. And so you're living in a nightmare. And a lot of times these bad trips, it feels like something's gonna happen to you. You're gonna get hurt in some way, or somebody else is gonna get hurt unless you act. But again, you're sort of out of your mind. And so you have these shamans present to protect you from yourself. But Ivan and Ludmila didn't have a shaman present. And so when they entered their trip, Ludmila was having a good trip, Ivan was not. He had a horrible trip. And in his trip, he believed that Ludmila had become possessed by evil spirits, and he needed to save her soul. And how was he gonna save her? Well, he took a metal bottle and beat her savagely, and then he went and got a knife from the communal kitchen, and he proceeded to dismember her. That staff member who walked over and screamed, they looked in and saw Ivan looking at them, smiling, totally insane looking, still high on ayahuasca, and there are pieces of Ludmila all over the bungalow. Here is a picture that was taken of Ivan very shortly after that staff member discovered this bloodbath inside of the bungalow. Ivan is literally sitting on the ground, feet away from pieces of Ludmila. He's just murdered her savagely, and he's still absolutely tripping on ayahuasca. He looks like an absolute madman. Ivan would come down from his ayahuasca trip, and when he did, he immediately confessed to what he had done, and he was arrested for murder, and he is currently serving time in prison in Peru. Around 4 p.m. on August 20th, 1975, an 18-year-old boy named Michael McQuilkin hiked up a massive granite rock called Morro Rock, which is in Sequoia National Park in California. Michael's 12-year-old brother Sean and his 15-year-old sister Mary were also on this hike with him, but currently they were lagging way behind, and he could just tell it was because they were tired. Now, the hike to the summit of Morro Rock was only a quarter of a mile, like this is a pretty short hike, but it was really steep. And Michael, despite only being 18, was sort of a pretty seasoned climber. I mean, he had just hiked 200 miles through the Sierra Nevada mountain range all by himself. And so for him, this terrain was no big deal, but he knows his siblings are not big mountaineers, nor are they pretending to be. And so he thought, okay, I'll wait, I'll let them catch up. But as Michael waited, he started to notice that the sky was getting pretty dark. Now, he had checked the weather before coming out here, and there was not supposed to be a storm, but it was sort of undeniable that something's happening. This is not normal. It's getting pretty dark and windy. But Michael told himself that, maybe there's just a little pocket of weather and it'll pass. This can't be a big deal. And then eventually his siblings finally caught up to him. And then together, just a couple of minutes later, they were right at the summit. Now, by the time they were on the summit, they're looking out and the view is spectacular. But now it's becoming increasingly apparent to all three of them that this weather system, whatever's rolling in here, is pretty big and pretty bad. This is not some passing little thing. The sky is like pitch black at this point. But before they left, they just wanted to take a quick picture. And so because they didn't have a tripod or anything, they actually had Mary just take a picture of Michael and Sean. It was the best they were going to do. They couldn't really get a group shot. And so Mary snaps a photo of the two brothers. And then after taking this photo, they put the camera away and they're about to begin their descent when suddenly, all around them, everything turns bright white and there's this loud cracking sound, and then Michael is thrown to the ground, and before he has any idea what's going on, he's looking over and he sees his brothers on the ground, his sisters on the ground, and in fact, he sees smoke coming off of Sean's back. And that's when he realized they had just been struck by lightning. Now, Michael didn't really know if he was badly hurt or not, but he was able to jump right to his feet and he felt like he was basically okay. And his sister also, she was able to stand up, and they're obviously both disoriented and shocked. But Sean, he's in a heap on the ground and is literally smoking. It seemed like he really took the brunt of this lightning strike. And so Michael and his sister, they scooped Sean up, and together they hustled down the mountain. They got in a car and they rushed to the hospital. And somewhat unbelievably, despite taking effectively a near direct hit from a lightning bolt, Sean survived. He was covered in burns, but he and Michael and Mary all lived through this strike. But the reason we know about this lightning strike is not just because they survived. That's great, but that's not why we still talk about it today. The reason we still talk about it today is because of that picture that Mary took of Michael and Sean standing on the summit of this mountain. If you look at this picture, you can see that the two brothers, their hair is sticking up in all directions. And they noticed at the time that their hair was standing up, but they didn't know why. They thought it was kind of funny. That's why they're smiling in the picture. But what they didn't realize they were capturing in this photo is the very scary phenomenon that occurs when you're basically right about to be struck by lightning. The air around you, especially if you're in a very exposed spot, like the summit of a mountain, gets electrically charged and your hair stands up right before you're hit by the bolt. And so now this picture is now used by the National Park Service to show people what to be aware of when you're out hiking on these mountains. If your hair starts to stand up, you better move. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought of today's episode in the comments. And remember, we have hundreds of videos for you to binge right now. But if you're looking for a recommendation from me of that one video that's worth your time, well, it's this one right here. So give it a watch. All right, until next time, see ya.
Today's story sounds exactly like an urban legend. It sounds too exaggerated, too grotesque, too terrifying to be real. But it is. This is the true story of the Bitsevsky Park maniac. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because...
Did you see that clip where Hassan is trying to cross-stream to Chinese Twitch and then they immediately ban it?
Just before we get started, a quick heads up. Your email might already be part of a scam in your browser. Now scam checking. Like, is this a scam? I don't know. It's basically cleaner. So speed. World War I was so speed. Definitely not an issue. Go to surfshark.com/ITS or use the code ITS at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN for free. And now today's video. World War I was one of the greatest catastrophes in modern history. Across the 4 years following 1914, somewhere between 15 and 20 million people died. Remarkably, though, this wasn't even the worst event of that decade, as the guns finally fell silent. Returning soldiers and their families would come face to face with an upheaval so deadly it would make the Great War look like a mere warming-up party. Known as Spanish flu, that upheaval would sweep away an estimated 50 million people before the Roaring Twenties even began. Infecting around a third of the world's population, it appeared completely without warning and struck with terrifying speed, killing some victims within hours. Even today, it remains the deadliest pandemic since the Black Death. Today, its story. At some point, we've probably all had the flu. This ruiner of family Christmases and Valentine's Days spreads like wildfire during the winter season, often hitting us when life feels depressing enough already. And so we might feel sorry for ourselves, we might spend a few days in bed, we might see it as an excuse to eat junk and binge-watch Netflix. Today, the prevalence of flu might lull us into thinking it's not so bad. For most of us, it's nothing more than an unpleasant interlude grouped in with coughs and colds. Needless to say, this was not the case with Spanish flu. It was certainly widespread, affecting around 500 million people worldwide, but it was also unusually deadly. At this point, I should caveat that influenza is still a seriously dangerous illness for some people. It's caused by a different virus to the common cold. It typically shows up faster and can make us feel much worse. Typically, the flu virus, we all know and loathe, is more likely to severely affect young children, the elderly, and those with weakened immune systems or certain health conditions. For this reason, many countries offer a seasonal vaccination for the vulnerable, but still, every year people do die from influenza. The difference with Spanish flu was that it disproportionately affected young, healthy adults. Those who seemed the least likely to get ill were the ones dropping dead, often within days. At its peak, during the autumn and winter of 1918, around half of deaths were among those aged 20 to 40. The likeliest explanation for this is that older populations had already been exposed at some point to a virus similar to Spanish flu. Essentially, they'd built up some degree of immunity where younger generations hadn't. When they got ill, they were more likely to fight it off and recover. Another plausible explanation for this fatal skew towards young adults is a cytokine storm. This can be caused when a young, healthy immune system overreacts to a threat, which then leads to organ failure. The difficulty with any type of influenza is that we can never really predict how it will behave. New flu strains pop up every year, which is why modern vaccines have to be tailored to its latest form. There are also 3 different types of flu that can affect humans, known as A, B, and C. Type C influenza can affect both humans and pigs, but is usually mild and doesn't cause epidemics. Type B is what we think of as common flu, the virus causing many of those seasonal epidemics. It's highly contagious, but for most patients, it can be treated at home. The Spanish flu outbreak was caused by a type A influenza virus. This is far nastier than its siblings. It primarily originates in wild water birds, but can jump between species, notably from birds to humans. Of the 3 flu types, influenza A has the potential to spark a pandemic, which was exactly what happened in 1918. But we still don't know for sure where exactly Spanish flu came from. We can, however, trace it back to its earliest days. Today we think of Spanish flu as a nasty follow-up to World War I. Its second deadly wave reached its peak in the autumn of 1918, just as events were wrapping up. A third wave peaked during the spring of 1919 during peacetime. But actually, this was a pandemic born in the mud and blood of the trenches. It emerged deep in the war years, and it began with the soldiers who were fighting. It's likely that cases began in 1915. At that time, we know that around 30,000 soldiers were serving in France and were admitted to army hospitals with respiratory issues. The following year, 1916, another 30,000 fell ill. 30,000 or 60,000 across both years. It does sound like a lot, but at the time it was still a fairly small proportion of the 2 million soldiers who were there. By 1917, however, something had changed. Larger numbers of cases were emerging. More and more men were forced to swap their military duties for a hospital bed, but it took a while for the extent of the problem to hit home. Today, researchers found evidence of long-neglected outbreaks of infection which were brushed off at the time as minor. Finally, in July 1917, 3 army doctors stationed in France published an article in the Lancet Medical Journal. Together, they highlighted numerous cases of purulent bronchitis at a base in northern France. This was actually the British Army's largest hospital complex, which boasted 20,000 beds. There, a particularly cold winter had exacerbated what seemed to be an unusually fatal disease. During February and March 1917, 45% of deaths at the base were due to the condition, and, as the frost thawed, doctors said, the cases fell. This wouldn't be a full-scale Spanish flu epidemic, but a grim herald of what was to come. All the same, those 1917 cases were nasty. Sufferers tended to fall into one of 2 groupings. The most severe cases usually presented with a constant temperature of around 103 degrees Fahrenheit or 39 Celsius. Those patients coughed up blood-streaked mucus, were short of breath, had an extremely rapid heart rate, and showed distinct signs of cyanosis. This gives a bluish tinge to areas like the hands, feet, and lips, acting as a signpost for low oxygen levels in the blood. Within a week, those patients would be dead from something doctors described as lung block, a contemporary term for lungs filled with fluid and immune cells. We might today think of it as drowning on dry land. The second grouping consisted of those who presented with a fluctuating temperature that peaked 2 or 3 degrees lower than those in the first group, just over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. To begin with, they'd cough up frothy mucus, which went on to become yellow or green. Their illness charted a much longer course. For between 3 and 6 weeks, they'd sweat, suffer, and waste away, but at the end of it, they'd usually survive. At the same time in Aldershot in the south of England, another group of doctors was noticing the same thing, a severe and deadly form of respiratory infection. Among the infected, those marked for death all showed the telltale sign of cyanosis on their face, lips, and ears. It became a grisly sort of calling card. Only afterwards would these epidemics be identified as influenza. In any case, it didn't seem to spread from patients to medical staff or into the general population. Instead, it was considered a form of epidemic bronchitis. The emerging virus was still a little clumsy. It hadn't yet learned how to spread quickly and efficiently. But it would. Fort Riley, in Kansas. As the US joins Allied forces in the fight against Germany, between 40 and 50,000 American soldiers are crammed into one of the country's biggest training camps. From there, they'll be sent out to the battlefronts in Europe. It's a loud and busy place, sweltering hot in summer and numbingly cold in winter. People come and go, feeding the great war machine of the Western Front. It's there that company cook Albert Gitchell becomes the first recognized case of Spanish flu. Gitchell reported to Fort Riley's Camp Funston Hospital just before breakfast on March the 4th, 1918, complaining of a cold and a high temperature. Minutes later, Corporal Lee W. Drake presented himself with the same symptoms. Within a week, there were over 520 others. At the same time, similar outbreaks were happening among soldiers in Virginia, Georgia, Florida, South Carolina, and California. As troops traveled overseas in their thousands, cases began to spread. From April 1918, French and American soldiers were falling ill, complaining of sore throats, headaches, and lack of appetite. The virus crept across Britain, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. At this point, though, mortality rates were still low. Although some patients went on to develop secondary infections like pneumonia, most recovered within a few days. And that didn't stop it spreading, of course. US troops and doctors called the illness 3-day fever. Other nicknames were Flanders fever or Flanders flu. The illness was well known among those on the ground, but it still wasn't widely reported in the press. In May 1918, the Madrid-based ABC newspaper published a story about the sudden strange illness affecting people in Spain. A reporter wrote, "It is truly a strange thing to come across a relative, executor, or friend who is not sick with the flu or convalescing from it. Within a week, Spain's King Alfonso XIII had fallen ill." And this is where the erroneous naming of Spanish flu comes in. Because, of course, this wasn't a Spanish flu at all. It didn't affect the people of Spain any differently, and as we know, it didn't even originate there. The name was actually just another product of World War I. At the time, the countries at war, like Britain, strictly controlled what news could be reported and how. Governments were worried that writing about a serious influenza outbreak might affect morale among the public. It could even lead the enemy powers to seeing Allied forces as weak. What newspapers could report, however, was the cases in Spain. As a neutral country, Spain couldn't be negatively affected by the publicity. This created a false impression of the virus's origins and spread, and so the influenza outbreak would forever be known as Spanish flu. At the time, people just couldn't know how deadly the pandemic would become. In June 1918, the war poet Wilfred Owen wrote a letter to his mother. In capital letters, he jokingly instructed her to stand back from the page and disinfect yourself. Owen described how a third of his fellow soldiers and officers were smitten with the Spanish flu. The hospital overflowed on Friday, then the gymnasium was filled, and now all the places seemed to be carpeted with huddled, blanketed forms. The boys are dropping on parade like flies in number. Today, it's hard to get a completely accurate read on infection levels. At the time, influenza wasn't a notifiable disease, meaning that cases didn't have to be reported. If symptoms were mild or the flu led into other illnesses like pneumonia, it could easily be missed. Nevertheless, the warm summer weather had its advantages in dampening down the worst of the infection. By August 1918, some people were even declaring the epidemic over. To be blunt, it wasn't over. By September 1918, the situation at Fort Riley in Kansas had completely overwhelmed the officers in charge. As the flu spread to more and more regiments, it rapidly became clear that the Army base hospital wouldn't be able to cope. A large auditorium, the Kansas building, was prepared as an overflow. It was opened on September 30th at 8 p.m. By midnight, 229 patients had arrived. The next day, second and third overflow hospital buildings were opened. They had outdoor field kitchens to help prepare food. Former barracks were also transformed into hospitals capable of holding 3,000 patients. In just one day, October the 2nd, 708 cases were admitted. Somehow, these soldiers, prepped for an enemy on the European stage, found themselves fighting a foe far closer to home. Because by the autumn of 1918, influenza wasn't dying out, it was changing. This milder first wave of spring and summer was just that, a first wave. Doctors and pathologists could have taken warnings from the Russian flu pandemic of the early 1890s. Then, an initial infection had been followed by a deadlier second. With colder weather on the way, the Spanish flu's second wave was about to begin. Never since the Black Death has such a plague swept over the face of the world. This was the conclusion reached by the Times newspaper in December 1918. It just about summed things up. At this point, we've hopped forward a few months from those summer days, but those few months made a world of difference. As 1918 drew to a close, Britain's death rate had just exceeded its birth rate for the first time since records began in 1837. It's estimated that 64% of the 228,000 flu-related deaths that happened there took place in the final 3 months of the year. And it wasn't just in Britain. Across the world, the autumn and winter of 1918 had been harrowing. Extensive troop movements during the war and after the armistice in November meant that the virus was carried to almost every corner of the globe. The author Catherine Arnold has described how, quote, the war turned the world into a giant petri dish in which the virus could spread and evolve. And it did those two things very effectively. The Spanish flu virus was transmitted by airborne particles, tiny droplets passing from person to person. This might be when a carrier coughed or sneezed near someone else, or even when they breathed or talked in close proximity. The average survival time, or time to death, for an infected person was 2 weeks. But for some, the illness might only take days, or even hours. As the world finally started to take the situation more seriously, a smattering of official guidance was shared. Some actions were reasonable and would make sense to us today. Do not take any person's breath. The phrasing is definitely weird, but the general message is sound. Cover your mouth when you cough and sneeze. Yes, indeed. Other advice does feel less sound today. Brushing your teeth, eating porridge, and drinking brandy were all genuine suggestions made. I like those suggestions. Amid the fear and confusion, manufacturers saw an opportunity to cash in. A flurry of adverts came out promoting products like Crimson Cross influenza tablets and Formamint, the germ-killing throat tablet. Described as the food that builds, Kymol contained a mixture of bone marrow and egg yolk that could be spread on biscuits or mixed into drinks. Lovely. One advert claimed, influenza attacks the weak. Stay strong and well by taking Kymol. Chemists reported people panic buying quinine and other medicines in the hopes that it would protect them. As everyone became wary of going into crowded spaces, one advert for a phonograph record player described it as, quote, the machine guaranteed to drive away the flu. For $45, you could swap nights at the theatre for musical parties at home. But in a lot of homes, things were not so jolly. In some of the worst hit parts of the United States, special measures were introduced in an attempt to curb the virus's spread. In November 1918, the Washington State Board of Health issued an order that all residents had to wear a face mask in certain confined areas. These included streetcars, cabs, boats, and ferries, all public buildings and offices, stores, restaurants, and cafes, and barbershops and washhouses. Schools and theaters were closed. Dancers were banned. Rumors spread that the Germans were deliberately infecting Americans to weaponize the disease. In a letter to a friend, one volunteer nurse described, quote, 2 German spies posing as doctors caught giving these influenza germs to the soldiers. It sounds unlikely now, but nevertheless, the 2 men were shot at sunrise the following Saturday morning. Despite increasing safety measures, the virus had already taken hold. In some cases, entire families were being wiped out, and low stocks of what we might call funeral-related supplies caused havoc. Wartime conscription, sickness, and the fear of infection caused a major shortage in gravediggers. William Sardo, whose family owned a Washington funeral home, would later remember pine caskets stacked in his living room. Age 6, he caught the virus but survived. He was one of the lucky ones. To solve Washington's grave-digging problem, District Health Officer William C. Fowler first enlisted soldiers and then inmates from the Occoquan prison. And yes, this removed one obstacle, but it was quickly replaced by another. People were dying at such a rapid pace that many places began running out of coffins. Washington, Baltimore, and Philadelphia all saw coffin shortages, but it was a similar story all over. The end of the war brought hope back to the lives of everyday people after years of fear, deprivation, and suffering. When the armistice was announced on November the 11th, people in towns and cities far and wide took to the streets. They danced, kissed, and hugged in celebration. Pubs were piled high with people sharing drinks and cigarettes and talking about what they'd do next. Looking at this through the lens of our COVID-19 experiences, we all know what this meant. Such close contact in close quarters was, for the virus, like pouring lighter fluid on a fire. All that wonderful post-war joy was about to go up in smoke. The return and movement of servicemen and women, the general air of celebration, and the cooling into winter in the Northern Hemisphere all prompted the second wave's peak in October and November 1918. As London's death rate reached 1,500 people a week, bodies were buried in basic, cobbled-together coffins or simply wrapped in cloth. Mass graves became common. A man from Stepney would later recall, quoting, "The undertakers couldn't make the coffins quick enough, let alone polish them. The gravediggers worked from dawn to dusk 7 days a week to cope." The speed at which the Spanish flu struck gave families very little time to prepare themselves. In that autumn of 1918, City Attorney Frank Norval left his home in Anacortes, quote, "in the best of health." He was headed to work at the Fort Worden Army base. But when the virus broke out, Norval answered a desperate call for volunteers to work in its hospital. According to a newspaper, in one shift he worked for 26 hours without sleeping. After a 5-hour rest, he volunteered another 12 hours before going home, quote, "stricken with the influenza." In less than 2 days, pneumonia had taken hold. With no time to receive notice of his illness, the first news his shocked family heard was that of his death. In another case, a 21-year-old mother died at home from Spanish flu just 2 days after giving birth. By the end of November 1918, the second wave was beginning to wane. In areas like Anacortes, theatres and schools reopened and public gatherings were allowed to pick back up. In London, the weekly death toll from influenza, pneumonia and bronchitis had peaked at 3,212 on the 9th of November. By the 28th of December, it had fallen to 305. But like every horror villain you ever thought was dead, Spanish flu made one final comeback. Winter has always been considered the flu season. Cold air, less sunlight, i.e. less vitamin D, both hack away at our ability to fight off viruses, meaning any natural immunity drops. Added to that, we spend more time indoors, which increases our close contact with other people's germs. We're more likely to take public transport rather than walking or cycling. The air itself is drier, which creates the right conditions for the flu virus to spread more easily. And so, in the Northern Hemisphere, places like Europe and North America, that cold, dry, germ-rich air was just waiting for a third wave. January 1919 kicked off with another rise in cases, which would continue into spring. Again, the global response was mixed. In some locations, measures like school closures were reintroduced. In others, people carried on as before. And by this point, it's probably fair to say that the world was done with the Spanish flu. Most people still complied with instructions, but a small and vocal faction began to push back. In the San Francisco streets of January 1919, cases initially remained fairly low. This might have been because it was one of 8 Northern Californian cities to reintroduce compulsory mask wearing, but not everyone could see the advantages. That January, San Francisco's Anti-Mask League held a heated protest meeting. Around 4,500 people turned up to air their views, and probably also their germs. At this time, most third-wave outbreaks were confined to the northern part of the globe where it was winter. If I had a big world map here, I'd largely be sticking pins in places like the US, Canada, the UK, and Scandinavia. But if you looked more closely, you'd also see some little clusters of pins way down at the bottom in Australia and New Zealand. There, the weather was warmer, but Spanish flu was still spreading. Unfortunately for these locations, they'd guarded a bit too well against the previous waves. Tight maritime quarantines, which had been implemented in October 1918, had kept the floodgates closed against the worst of the virus. It wasn't until 1919 that the first cases of Spanish flu reached the Australian mainland. Predictably, it didn't take long to travel. By the end of the month, both New South Wales and Victoria had officially declared an outbreak. Strict measures were hurriedly brought in, state governments enforced mask wearing, church and theatre closures, and transport restrictions. All the same, around 15,000 people died. Bucking the worldwide trend, though, this was less than a quarter of the number of Australians killed in the First World War. In other locations, flu followed the path of winter and spring. In Chile, for instance, deaths peaked in August 1919, which was the middle of their winter. These geographic differences mean there's no such thing as a clear cutoff point for the Spanish flu pandemic. And alongside this element of chaos, different populations were affected differently. In India, Spanish flu was unusually deadly. There it was also known as Bombay influenza or Bombay fever, and it carried a 5% fatality rate, higher than the average 2 to 3% in places like Europe. Remote or isolated communities also suffered disproportionately. This may have been because their residents had been less exposed to viruses before and had a lower general immunity. In many cases, rural and indigenous populations also received significantly less support with healthcare. While Australia's overall mortality rate was relatively low, among First Nations communities, it reached as high as 50%. In Labrador, the virus arrived through infected ships' crews. Populations here had been fairly well sheltered from the flu's first wave, which meant that within days of one ship's departure, the illness was visibly spreading. Almost a third of the Inuit population was killed, and some communities collapsed completely. In Okak Bay, 204 of the 263 residents died. But with the shortage of workers and the ground frozen solid, it was impossible to bury their bodies. Initially, the dead were all moved into one house, awaiting a time when they could be buried. But as they began to outnumber the living, it was easier for the survivors to instead gather themselves in a few corpse-free houses. And that's where this already tragic tale takes an even bleaker turn. Untended and starving, Okak sled dogs, once so vital to the community, began breaking into houses, eating the corpses and attacking the sick. To protect the survivors, young boys were armed with guns. Around 100 dogs were shot. By January 1919, every Inuit adult male in Okak had died. The Moravian missionaries who'd originally established themselves there and the surviving residents were resettled. These kinds of stories crop up again and again. In fact, the narrative of the Spanish flu, which is already pretty awful, has some decidedly dark chapters. Another one is the small but significant number of sufferers who experienced a rare Spanish flu side effect. For them, the virus sparked violent episodes of psychosis with devastating results. In November 1918, residents in Stowmarket, East Anglia, woke to the news that the local baker, Leonard Sitch, had been discovered dead. He'd brutally killed his wife and 2 sons, aged 3 and 7, before hanging himself. The week before, he'd been confined to his bed with tonsillitis and Spanish flu. Only a few weeks earlier, another man, James Sidney Shaw, had cut his 2-year-old daughter's throat. Newspapers reported that when a doctor examined him, Shaw did not seem to know anything about the tragedy. It was attributed to delirium during influenza. It was shocking. But this wasn't unique to the Spanish flu pandemic. It had actually been widely reported by doctors during the Russian flu of the 1880s. Harley Street neurologist Julius Althaus wrote that patients experienced, quote, dark forebodings of impending disaster or became sure that they'd committed a fearful crime. Another doctor, Thomas Stretch Dowse, believed that influenza overstrained the brain. Other patients suffered effects including severe depression and insomnia. At a Royal Air Force base at Blandford Camp, a nearby wood was apparently known as Wood. It was a final, cruel outcome for those who had endured the worst of the virus. Like a raging storm, the Spanish flu pandemic finally blew itself out around the spring of 1920. Cases had dropped significantly before this, with the end of the third wave in the summer of 1919. Pockets of resistance lingered on. In Chile, which I've already mentioned, the third wave was actually pushed into the spring and summer of 1920 and 1921. But in very broad terms, it was on the way out. A huge proportion of the world's population had already encountered the virus, meaning herd immunity could take over. It wouldn't be the only flu pandemic through history, though. After 1918, the next major outbreak of a type A influenza was the so-called Asian flu, which spread over the world from southern China in 1957. Just over a decade later, in 1968, another pandemic struck known as Hong Kong flu. This was followed by Russian flu in 1977 and finally the 2009 swine flu pandemic. Yet none of these would be anywhere near as deadly as the Spanish flu. In the 50s and 60s, both Asian flu and Hong Kong flu caused the deaths of between 1 and 4 million people. For Russian flu, that figure is estimated at 700,000. Our most recent swine flu caused somewhere between 18,500 and 575,000 deaths, although those figures are disputed. And if you're wondering about COVID-19, well, it's not a type of flu virus, it's a coronavirus. So although they're both contagious respiratory illnesses, and although some symptoms might be the same, they're not actually related. A joint 2004 study by Christina Mills, James Robbins, and Mark Lipswich found that, quote, the 1918 pandemic was particularly destructive. The case fatality proportion, CFP, was 10 times higher than in all other influenza pandemics. This case fatality, the percentage of people who caught Spanish flu and died, was between 2 and 3%. This might not sound like a huge amount, but let's remember, across its multiple waves, Spanish flu killed between 50 and 100 million people. As I said at the opening of the video today, these numbers make Spanish flu the deadliest pandemic since the Black Death way back in the 14th century. For reference, that particular germ fest killed between 25 and 50 million people, between 30 and 60% of the European population. So why isn't Spanish flu better known? Coming hot on the heels of World War I, it was the almost literal ghost at the feast. A population of young adults that had already been decimated by war was then struck disproportionately again. In the space of a few years, a large chunk of this entire generation was completely wiped out. Far more of them died this horrible, lung-blocked death than they did in the trenches. But across the world, there are almost no mentions to the victims of Spanish flu. Britain is just one of the countries where there's no public recognition at all. Maybe this stems from what was a general unwillingness to talk about the virus. We know it wasn't widely reported during wartime, but even after war and during the second wave, any criticism of governmental handling would be avoided. And perhaps embattled societies were just tired of it all. Martin Bailey from the London School of Economics has written that, quote, the sheer pace of death fostered a silencing of grief. In fact, if you knew much at all about Spanish flu before starting the video today, it might only be because you've watched Downton Abbey. In Series 2, a key secondary character dies from the virus. I won't give any spoilers, but I mean, if you know, you know. In reality, several notable people of the day also succumbed to it, although many of their names won't mean much to us now. The death toll included the Austrian artist Gustav Klimt, British composer Hubert Parry, and American race car driver Harry Harkness. Spanish flu also took both John and Horace Dodge, the pioneers who founded the Dodge Brothers Automobile Company. The men were interred in an elaborate Egyptian-style mausoleum in Detroit, which boasted columns, carvings, and an entrance guarded by 2 Sphinx statues. Other famous figures caught the virus but lived, people like the author D.H. Lawrence, who'd gone to write Lady Chatterley's Lover. In 1919, the writer and heiress Nancy Cunard, part of the famous shipping dynasty, fell ill with the Spanish flu, followed by pneumonia. This prompted what she called a serious case of nerves, what we'd now call depression. The war poet Rupert Graves also caught it, taking it home to his family in Hove. Then the British Prime Minister, David Lloyd George, caught the virus and recovered. And so we can draw a veil back over this awful chapter in human history. With all that horror so freshly behind them, it's hardly surprising that the younger generation, the bright young things as they'd been known, led the charge of the Roaring Twenties. As the deadly 1910s finally ended, they washed away the remainders of their own mortality in a flood of alcohol, jazz, dancing, and fun. This was a decade of flight, film, and freedom in fashion, a lost generation of writers and artists, embracing modernism and decadence. But of course, it was also the decade of prohibition, slums, and organized crime. The 20s shuddered to a halt with the Wall Street crash in 1929 and a Great Depression that would dominate the 1930s. I guess they just couldn't have it all. Thank you for watching.
In 1922, the Soviet Union was formed, a new nation that would have a profound impact on the entire globe. It would emerge from the remnants of the Russian Empire after a long and bloody civil war.
Russia, in the aftermath of the Bolshevik Revolution, was a country in absolute turmoil. A brutal and bloody clash of arms trying to wipe out this new regime before it can take control of the country.
The Bolsheviks finally succeeded in about 1922, and then came the hard work of trying to create, for the first time ever, a new socialist country.
From out of nowhere, Vladimir Lenin had become the leader of the largest nation on earth and was now imposing his will.
Lenin won the war. Lenin won the revolution. Lenin's one of those amazing figures who really are decisive in history. One's got to understand that Lenin was an autocratic character who really didn't want anyone to succeed him. That's true of most autocratic characters in history.
But Lenin would have a successor who proved to be the most ruthless of all figures when dealing with both his own people and his foreign enemies.
They realized after the revolution that the Soviet Union was surrounded by enemies. It didn't have a friend in the world. They felt that way, and they were probably right. And the only defense was to build an enormous army with a lot of tanks and a lot of aircraft and a lot of ships, which they did.
In the aftermath of World War II, the Soviet Union emerged as a new global superpower that matched the once mighty Russian Empire of old.
All of us who were then young, we were seeing great achievements by the Soviet Union. They launched the Sputnik satellite, fantastic scientific achievement. They put the first man into space, Yuri Gagarin, fantastic achievement. And so people were saying they saw the Soviet Union as a genuine, comparable competitor with the United States.
Now, a century from its formation, the Soviet Union seems to define the whole of the 20th century. In 1917, the Romanov dynasty fell, and Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks had managed to seize power in the Russian Revolution. This new government signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk with the Central Powers, bringing an end to Russian involvement in World War I. But despite an end to the conflict with foreign governments, the battle for Russia itself would continue for years.
In the beginning, it seemed fairly simple. It seemed to be the Red Army, which was an army of soldiers with hardly any officers, and the other army is the White Army, which you could say was an army of officers with hardly any soldiers, who wanted to put Russia back to what it had been before the First World War and possibly continue that war to a victory. And then it got complicated.
For really the better part of 2-3 years, this struggle is taking place for control of this vast and completely turbulent country. At the same time, other things are going on. There is a famine. There's a war going on between Russia and Poland at the same time. And there are endless mutinies, rebellions taking place, notably the Kronstadt mutiny, where the sailors of the fleet rebel against the new Bolshevik government. So not only is the Bolshevik government fighting for its very survival, but it's fighting against powerful and disparate forces, all of whom have one goal, and that is destroy it.
Various national groups formed their own armies, the Ukrainians, the Georgians, and they all fought. There was an anarchist army which fought all sides, sometimes allying with one. So basically red and white, with various other factions, and of course from 1919, the Japanese, the French, the British, and the Americans all thought they might intervene and save something from the situation. So there were at least 5 or 6 foreign armies also, mostly fighting the Bolsheviks and trying to help the whites, but in the end giving up, because the presence of foreign soldiers only made the Red Army stronger. It increased national feeling among the peasants and the workers.
But while Lenin, as the overall leader of the Bolsheviks, and Trotsky, as the leader of the Red Army, wound up victorious in the Russian Civil War, it was another figure who truly established himself during the fighting.
Lenin and Trotsky are now firmly in power. The Cheka is abolished. In its place comes the OGPU, or Political Police. And to check on the OGPU, there is Rob Kreen, the Workers' and Peasants' Inspection Group. whose chief is one Joseph Vissarionovich Djugashvili. Party name, Stalin.
Well, Stalin was born in Georgia, one of the national areas of the Russian Empire. He was the son of a shoemaker. Initially, he was intended to go into the church. He attended a seminary. He joined the Bolsheviks at a young age, and he became known for his practical work, working in the underground, organizing bank robberies and political demonstrations. He was never, he spent a few years abroad, but he was mainly an inside guy. And in the course of the Civil War, he became in charge of all of the Bolshevik cadres, the organization, and he developed a patronage network in that way. So then he became obviously one of the potential successors to Lenin.
Everyone underestimated him because he pretended to be not as clever as he was. He pretended not to know foreign languages. He pretended not to have read anything. So they thought, this is a useful gopher. He'll do as a sort of chief whip to get others into organization. And when they founded a central committee, they thought, well, what's the most boring job on a committee? It's a secretary. But the point is that the secretary, if they have enough personality and power and ruthlessness, is the person who determines what the agenda is, who is going to receive that agenda, who is going to be notified of the meeting, and who is going to be allowed to speak, and who writes the notes, and so on. So as a result of that, right to the end of the Soviet Union, the most powerful person was the first secretary of the Central Committee, not the president, not the chairman. And that was Stalin's doing.
One of Stalin's key tasks in the Bolshevik Party had been how the issue of the nationalities that made up the Russian Empire would be handled by this new regime.
You know, his interest in the nationalities and the creation of the Soviet Union was that Lenin appointed him in 1911, 1912 to be his nationalities expert. And Stalin went to Vienna and lived there for a few months and wrote his paper on the nationalities question, which him and Lenin worked out what to do with the nationalities. You've got to understand that the Russian Empire was a multi-ethnic empire. It contained something like 100 tiny ethnic groups, but obviously a handful of big ones. The biggest of them, of course, was the Russians themselves, Orthodox Russians. But then there were Poles who were Catholic, Finns who were Protestant, Georgians who had their own church, Azeris and Chechens who were Muslim. So the big question in the Russian Empire was, how do we overthrow the Tsar, and how do we liberate these peoples?
The problem of national minorities had been a thorny one throughout Europe. Woodrow Wilson decided the solution was to allow national groups to self-determine themselves and create nations if they wanted to. Russia was a multinational empire, so the problem was how to organize the different nationalities. And Lenin decided that nationalities should have their own homelands, that the Soviet Union would be socialist in content, nationalist in form. And so the republics were formed along these national lines.
So he'd retaken and reconquered Ukraine and Belarusia. He'd retaken the Caucasus, including Georgia, Stalin's homeland. But he'd lost the Baltics states, which became independent. He'd lost Finland and he'd lost Poland. So how does he manage the rest of this empire? And what does he do with these nationalities? Because the Bolsheviks have supported their right to freedom. And all of them have their own nationalist movements now. And all of them would, really like to be independent. That was the big question. What do we do? What kind of new country do we create to keep these territories within our new Soviet Bolshevik state and yet give them freedom? And that's the million-ruble question.
In December of 1922, the solution that the Bolsheviks enacted was the creation of a federal system of republics known as the USSR.
The name comes from the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. It was a union of quasi-independent, nominally independent republics. It was Soviet because the political form was elected councils. The Russian word for council is Soviet. It was socialist because the state owned the means of production.
To begin with, they had the Russian Federal Republic, which still exists. There was a Ukrainian republic once they'd entered Ukrainian independence, which lasted until about 1920. And there was a Caucasian republic, which later split into Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. Central Asia was still in chaos till 1924. And the present stands, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, they didn't really emerge until the middle of the 1920s. When they'd been pacified.
There were great differences between Lenin and Stalin about this new union of socialist republics. Lenin saw it as a decentralized system, with each socialist republic having considerable power over their own affairs. Stalin saw it very differently. He wanted it ruled from the center. He wanted Russia as the dominant force, Moscow as the center of power, and preferably himself running the whole thing. It was quite surprising, given that he himself was Georgian.
At the same time as this new state was being established, its leader was falling into a terrible state of health. A series of strokes would render Lenin unable to speak, and a new leader would soon be needed. One man had long been plotting for the position, and he would eventually become one of the most powerful and feared figures in the whole world. In January 1924, Vladimir Lenin died. The battle for succession of leadership in the Soviet Union was now truly underway, with one man, Stalin, determined to come out on top.
And then on January 21st, 1924, the moon-faced, balding dictator left the scene as abruptly as he had appeared. He literally died of overwork. His funeral was a monstrous affair. Hundreds of thousands queued up in the streets in 25-degree below zero weather. It seemed that everyone wanted to pay their last respects.
Stalin removed his rivals systematically with incredible ingenuity and in such a way they didn't know it was happening.
Lenin's great fear, I think, was that Stalin would develop a personality cult, a cult that had already developed around Lenin himself. And in fact, Stalin exploited this. He built up the cult of Lenin. When Lenin died, he took charge of the funeral arrangements. He wanted to have complete control of what happened to Lenin's legacy. It was Stalin who wanted Lenin's body to be embalmed, much against the wishes of Lenin's widow. And once Lenin was dead,